They said she'd last 3 days in the north, 3 days before the cold broke her, 3 days before King Kael's court chewed her up and spat her out like every other southern flower sent to die in the frozen wasteland. Seraphina Virel walked into that throne room knowing exactly what they thought of her. A pawn, a treaty sealed in silk, a sacrifice to buy her kingdom's survival. But when General Malcor sneered that women had no place in war councils, she smiled. And that smile? That was the beginning of everything. Stay until the end to see how one woman brought the most powerful kingdom in the north to its knees. Like this video if you love stories of courage against impossible odds, and comment what city you're watching from. The great hall of Frostholm smelled like smoke, sweat, and blood that hadn't quite washed out of the stone floors. Seraphina breathed it in, all of it, and kept her spine straight as iron. Presenting Lady Seraphina Virel of House Virel, daughter of the Southern Reaches, bride to King Kael Draven of the North. The herald's voice echoed off walls built from mountains and violence. Every eye in that hall turned toward her, not with curiosity, with assessment, like wolves sizing up fresh meat. Seraphina had expected nothing less. The dress they'd given her was ridiculous. Layers of white silk that would have been elegant in her father's warm courts, but looked absurd here, where everything was leather, fur, and steel. The seamstresses had tried to add warmth with a cloak of white fox fur, but it only made her look more fragile, more breakable, perfect. She walked forward, slow and deliberate, letting them look. Let them assume. Let them think they knew exactly what she was. The throne sat at this far end of the hall, elevated on a platform of black stone, and on that throne sat King Kael Draven. Seraphina had seen his portrait before the marriage contract was signed. Her father's advisors had shown her a painting of a stern-faced man with dark hair and darker eyes, handsome in that brutal northern way. The portrait had captured his features but missed everything important. It hadn't captured the weight of him. Kael Draven didn't just sit on that throne, he owned it, owned the room, owned every person in it. His presence pressed down like a physical thing, and Seraphina understood immediately why the North had never been conquered. This man wouldn't allow it. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with black hair tied back and a jaw that looked carved from the same stone as his fortress. Scars marked his hands and one traced from his temple to his cheekbone, a reminder that northern kings didn't inherit their crowns. They took them. His eyes met hers across the hall, dark, calculating, completely unreadable. Seraphina held his gaze and didn't stop walking. The court watched in silence. She could feel their attention like knife points against her skin. To her left, a group of warriors in blood-marked leather stood with arms crossed. To her right, advisors in dark robes whispered behind their hands. And directly beside the throne, a tall man with silver threading through his black hair watched her with something that might have been amusement. That would be General Malcor Vesh. Her father's spies had told her about him, the king's right hand, brilliant strategist, utterly loyal. The real power behind the throne, some said. Seraphina reached the base of the platform and stopped. Protocol demanded she kneel, bow her head, show deference to the king who now owned her future. She did kneel, slowly, gracefully, with perfect form. But when she lowered her head, she kept her eyes up, still watching him. A small thing, a tiny rebellion. But Kael's mouth twitched, just barely, like he'd noticed. "Lady Seraphina," he said. His voice was deep, carrying easily through the hall without shouting. "Welcome to Frostholm. Your Majesty." She rose without waiting for permission. "Thank you for your hospitality." "Hospitality," Malcor spoke from beside the throne, his tone pleasant and poisonous. "Is that what we're calling political marriages now?" A few laughs rippled through the court. Seraphina didn't flinch. "I call it what it is, General, an alliance. My kingdom gains the North's protection. Your kingdom gains—" She paused, tilted her head slightly. "What does the North gain exactly?" The laughter died. Kael leaned forward, studying her with new interest. "Trade routes. Access to southern ports. Resources we can't grow in frozen ground." "Ah," Seraphina smiled. "So I'm a transaction." "We're all transactions here, girl," Malcor said. "Some just cost more than others." "Then I suppose we should discuss my value." She turned to face the general fully. Since I'm new inventory. The hall went very quiet. Melkor's pleasant expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Bold words from someone who arrived an hour ago. Would you prefer I wait a week before speaking? A month? How long should a woman keep silent in the North, General? As long as it takes to understand she's out of her depth. Seraphina glanced around the hall deliberately, at the warriors, the advisors, the cold stone walls. From where I'm standing, General, the depth looks manageable. A warrior near the wall choked on what might have been a laugh. Melkor's jaw tightened. Kale stood. The movement was effortless, but it commanded instant attention. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to him. The welcome feast begins at sundown, he said. Lady Seraphina will want to rest after her journey. It was a dismissal wrapped in courtesy. Seraphina recognized the tactic. Get her out of the room before she said something that couldn't be unsaid. She curtsied, perfect and formal. Of course, Your Majesty. I look forward to tonight's discussions. She turned and walked back down that long hall with the same measured pace. Not hurrying, not running, just walking like she had every right to be there. Behind her, she heard Melkor's voice, low and amused. She'll be gone within a month. Kael's response was quieter, but it carried. We'll see. The room they'd given her was in the eastern tower, which apparently passed for hospitality in the north. Stone walls, a fireplace that worked too hard to heat too little, and narrow windows that showed nothing but snow and more stone. A servant had laid out clothes on the bed, northern clothes, practical and warm. Seraphina ran her fingers over the dark wool and soft fur lining. Someone had paid attention to her measurements. She moved to the window. The sun was setting early, throwing long shadows across the courtyard below. She could see guards drilling, their breath-forming clouds in the freezing air. Beyond the walls, mountains rose like teeth against a darkening sky. This was her home now, this frozen, hostile, beautiful place. A knock at the door. Enter. A woman came in, older, maybe 50, with gray hair braided tight, and eyes that assessed everything. She wore practical clothes and moved with the confidence of someone who'd earned her place. Lady Seraphina, I'm Maven, head of the household, here to help you dress for the feast. I can dress myself. I'm sure you can. Maven closed the door firmly. But if you show up tonight wearing that southern silk, they'll eat you alive before the first course. Seraphina turned from the window. You think clothes will make a difference? I think everything makes a difference here. The North doesn't forgive weakness or stupidity. Maven moved to the bed, sorting through the garments laid out. You made an impression today. Question is, what kind? The kind that makes General Melkor uncomfortable, apparently. Maven's hand stilled. Then she looked up, studying Seraphina with new attention. So you noticed him? Hard not to. He's the only one who talked to me like I was already irrelevant. Melkor talks to everyone that way, except the king. Maven pulled out a dress. Deep blue wool, simple but beautifully cut. He's been Kael's right hand for 15 years. Before you were even born, he was fighting beside your future husband in border wars. Sounds like loyalty. Sounds like ownership. Maven held up the dress. This will work. Northern style, but fitted enough to show you're not hiding, and the color suits you. Seraphina took it, feeling the weight of the fabric. Good quality. Warm. You're helping me. I'm doing my job. No, you're warning me about Melkor. That's more than your job. Maven's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. The king needs a queen who can survive here. I'm making sure that's possible. Why? Because the last 2 women sent here broke in 6 months. Both went home crying. Maven moved toward the door. And because Melkor has been running this court too long without opposition. Maybe it's time someone stood up to him. She left before Seraphina could respond. The feast hall was chaos wrapped in tradition. Long tables filled with warriors, advisors, and nobles, all of them loud, most of them drunk. None of them particularly interested in formal manners. Servers moved between them carrying platters of roasted meat, dark bread, and pitchers of something that smelled strong enough to strip paint. Seraphina entered, and the noise dropped just enough for people to notice her. She wore the blue dress Maven had chosen, Her hair pulled back in a northern braid, no jewelry except simple silver earrings. She looked like she belonged. Almost. Kael sat at the head table on a raised platform. Malkor was beside him, along with several other men who carried themselves like military leaders. A space had been left open to Kael's right, for her. She walked through the hall feeling dozens of eyes track her movement. Conversations picked up again, but she caught fragments. Lasted longer than I expected. Pretty enough, but soft. Give her a week. She climbed the platform steps and moved to her designated seat. Kael stood as she approached, a courtesy that surprised her. Lady Seraphina. He pulled out her chair himself. You look well. I look northern, she corrected, sitting. There's a difference. His mouth almost smiled. There is. Malkor leaned forward from Kael's other side. Adapting already? Impressive. Most southern ladies spend their first week crying about the cold. I don't cry about things I can't change, General. Smart. He raised his cup toward her in mock salute. Let's hope that wisdom extends to other areas. A warrior across the table, massive, scarred, with a beard that could hide weapons, laughed. Careful, Malkor. She's got teeth. Pretty teeth, another man added. But teeth don't win wars. Seraphina turned to look at him directly. He was younger, maybe 25, with the kind of confidence that came from never being challenged. No, she agreed. Strategy wins wars. Teeth just make the victory more satisfying. The table went quiet. Then the bearded warrior slammed his cup down, laughing. I like this one, Kael. She's got spine. We'll see how long it lasts, Malkor said pleasantly. Kael was watching her with that unreadable expression. Then he gestured to a servant who began filling her cup with the same dark liquid everyone else was drinking. Northern whiskey, Kael said. Strong enough to keep you warm through a blizzard. Or kill you trying, the bearded warrior added cheerfully. Seraphina picked up her cup and drank. The whiskey hit like liquid fire, burning all the way down. Her eyes watered, but she didn't cough, didn't gasp, just set the cup down carefully and took a slow breath. Well? Kael asked. It's terrible, she said honestly, but effective. More laughter. The bearded warrior raised his cup. To the new queen. May she survive us. To survival, Seraphina echoed and drank again. The feast continued. Food came in waves, roasted venison, smoked fish, root vegetables she didn't recognize, bread that was dense and filling. The conversation flowed around her, mostly military talk and border disputes. She listened more than she spoke, picking up names and relationships. The bearded warrior was Commander Hrothgar, leader of the Eastern armies. The quiet man beside him was Lord Theron, master of the Northern Fleet. The younger soldier who'd commented on her teeth was Captain Darius, Malkor's protege. And Malkor himself sat at the center of it all, steering conversations, making decisions, speaking for the king more often than Kael spoke for himself. The Western clans are getting bold again, Hrothgar was saying. 3 raids this month on border villages. Same pattern as last year, Malkor replied. They test our defenses before winter sets in. We should hit them hard, make an example. How hard? Kael asked. Burn their forward camps. Scatter their warriors. Show them the cost of testing us. Theron frowned. That'll cost resources we need for winter. Better to spend resources now than lose villages later, Malkor countered. The discussion continued, everyone offering opinions, strategies building on top of each other. Seraphina listened and sipped her terrible whiskey and let them forget she was there. Until Hrothgar turned to her suddenly. What do you think, Lady Seraphina? The table went quiet again. She could feel Malkor's attention sharpen. This was a test. Answer wrong, sound stupid, and they'd dismiss her forever. Answer right, and actually, she wasn't sure what happened if she answered right. I think, she said slowly, that burning camp sounds dramatic but doesn't solve the real problem. Malkor's expression was pleasant poison. And what is the real problem? Why they're raiding in the first place? She set down her cup. 3 raids this month, same as last year. That's not bold. That's desperate. Something's pushing them toward your borders. So we should just let them steal from us? Darius asked. No, you should figure out what they're stealing and why they need it. She looked at Kael directly. If they're taking food, there's famine. If they're taking weapons, there's a threat. If they're taking people, there's slavery or conscription happening. You can't fight a symptom and expect to cure the disease. Silence. Then Hrothgar laughed, surprised. She's not wrong. She's also not military, Malcor said smoothly. Respectfully, Lady Seraphina, strategy requires more than theory. Of course, she agreed. But burning camps without understanding why you're doing it? That's not strategy. That's just expensive revenge. Cale leaned back in his chair, studying her. What would you suggest instead? Send scouts, fast and quiet, find out what's happening in the Western Territories, then make your decision based on information instead of assumption. And if the information confirms they're just thieves, Malcor challenged. Then burn the camps, Seraphina said simply. But at least you'll know for certain you're solving the right problem. Darius snorted. This is why women don't make military decisions. Too cautious. Cautious? Seraphina turned to him. Captain, how many men would Commander Hrothgar lose in an aggressive campaign against entrenched camps? Depends on their numbers, defenses. Let's say 50 casualties if you're lucky, 100 if you're not, plus the resources spent on the campaign itself. She looked back at Malcor. And if the general's wrong about this being simple raiding, if there's a bigger threat pushing them toward the border, you've just spent men and resources fighting the wrong enemy. Bold assumptions, Malcor said. Based on your own pattern recognition, General. You said same pattern as last year. Patterns mean predictability. Predictability means you can afford to investigate before you act. Cale's fingers drummed once on the table. Send scouts west, he said. Tomorrow. Report back within a week. Malcor's pleasant expression never wavered, but his eyes went cold. Your Majesty. The lady makes a valid point. Kael stood, ending the discussion. We'll decide on action once we have information. He walked away from the table, heading toward a group of warriors near the fire. The conversation resumed, but the dynamic had shifted. People kept glancing at Seraphina, some curious, some hostile, some thoughtful. Malcor leaned toward her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Clever. But cleverness without power is just noise. Then I suppose I should focus on being useful, Seraphina replied equally quietly, since I'm already here. You won't last long enough to matter. You keep saying that, General. It's almost like you're worried. His smile was sharp and cold. I don't worry about temporary problems. He left the table, taking Darius and several other loyalists with him. Hrothgar slid into the empty seat beside her. You just made an enemy. I noticed. Good. He refilled her cup. Because most people don't see it coming. Malcor smiles while he destroys you. Why are you warning me? Because I've watched him undermine 3 queens now. Hrothgar drank deeply. And I'm tired of it. This kingdom needs someone who can stand up to him. You think that's me? I think you just challenged the War Council on your first night and didn't blink. That's a start. He stood, raising his voice to address the hall. To Lady Seraphina, who speaks truth even when it's uncomfortable. To truth, the hall roared back. Seraphina lifted her cup, drank, and wondered what exactly she'd just started. Later, much later, when the feast had dissolved into scattered groups of drunk warriors and the fire had burned low, Kael appeared beside her chair. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. Seraphina stood, her head pleasantly fuzzy from too much whiskey, and followed him out of the feast hall. The castle corridors were cold and quiet. Their footsteps echoed on stone floors. Guards stood at intervals, watching without speaking. Kael led her to a balcony overlooking the eastern mountains. Snow was falling, soft and steady, covering the world in white. You surprised me tonight, he said. Good or bad surprise? Haven't decided yet. He leaned against the balcony railing, looking out at the darkness. The scouts were a good idea. Will Malcor actually send them? He'll send them. He's too smart to openly defy me. Kael glanced at her. But he won't forgive you for embarrassing him. I didn't embarrass him. I offered an alternative perspective. In the north, that's the same thing. He was quiet for a moment. Why are you really here, Seraphina? Because my father signed a treaty. That's why you came. I'm asking why you're here, in this moment, fighting my advisors instead of keeping your head down. She considered lying, considered playing the role they expected, the quiet bride, the political pawn. But she was tired of that role already. Because keeping my head down means I disappear, she said, and I didn't survive the journey to this frozen fortress just to become invisible. Kyle turned to face her fully. You want to matter. I want to survive. Here, that seems to be the same thing. You're right. He studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time. Malcor will try to break you, quietly. Through reputation, isolation, manufactured failures, he's very good at it. Why do you keep him close if he's that dangerous? Because he's brilliant, ruthless, loyal to the kingdom even when he's undermining me. Kael's expression was unreadable. And because I've known him since I was 15, he saved my life in my first border war. Loyalty built on blood is hard to question. Exactly. Kael looked back at the mountains. But tonight, you made me question it anyway. Seraphina felt the weight of those words. I don't want to come between you and your general. You already have, the moment you challenged him in front of the council. Wait, he smiled, but it was a complicated expression. The question now is what you do next. What would you do? I'd be ruthless, strategic. I'd identify his weaknesses and exploit them before he destroys me. Is that advice or a warning? Both. Kael pushed away from the railing. You're smart, Seraphina. Smart enough to be useful or smart enough to be a threat. I haven't decided which yet. And if I'm both, then we'll see who's stronger. He left her there on the balcony, alone with the falling snow and the realization that she'd just entered a war she didn't fully understand. But she was done being underestimated, done being dismissed. And if Malcor Vesh thought she'd break quietly, he was about to learn just how wrong a brilliant man could be. The next morning, Seraphina woke before dawn to the sound of steel on steel. She dressed quickly in the practical northern clothes and made her way to the source of the noise, the training yard. Kyle was there, fighting 3 opponents at once. She stopped in the shadows and watched. He moved like violence made graceful, his sword an extension of his arm. The 3 warriors attacking him were skilled, but he was better, faster, more precise. He disarmed the first one, deflected the second strike, and swept the third's legs out from under him in a sequence that took maybe 4 seconds. Again, he ordered. They came at him again, and again, and again. Seraphina watched the pattern, how he anticipated their moves, created openings, controlled the fight without seeming to try. This wasn't just training. This was a king reminding his warriors why he wore the crown. Finally, he called a halt. The warriors bowed and left the yard, breathing hard. Kael noticed her then. Early riser? Couldn't sleep. The bed or the political situation? Both. He walked toward her, sword still in hand. Up close, she could see sweat on his face despite the freezing air. Want to learn? To fight? To survive? He offered her the sword hilt first. Same thing here. Seraphina took the weapon. It was heavier than she expected, the weight unfamiliar in her hands. Kael circled behind her, adjusting her grip. Tighter. You're holding it like it might break. It's heavier than it looks. Everything worth holding is. His hands covered hers, adjusting the angle. The weight is the point. You need to feel it. Understand it. Make it part of you. He stepped back. Now swing. She did. The blade cut air in an arc that felt completely wrong. Again. She swung again and again. Her arms started to burn after the 5th swing. Terrible form, Kael observed. But you're not complaining. That's something. Should I be? Most people would. He took the sword back, demonstrating a clean strike. The North respects strength, not complaints. I'll remember that when Malcor tries to destroy me. Kael lowered the sword. He sent the scouts, before dawn, 8 of his best. That was fast. He wants to prove you wrong. Show the council that your caution was unnecessary. Kael's expression was complicated. If they find nothing, you lose credibility. If they find exactly what Malcor expects, you look naive. And if they find something unexpected, then Malcor looks careless, and you look, he paused, dangerous. Which do you want? I want the truth. Kael handed the sword to a nearby servant, whatever that costs. He left her there in the training yard, and Seraphina understood with perfect clarity. She wasn't just fighting Malcor, she was fighting for the king's trust. And in the north, that was the only battle that actually mattered. The scouts returned on the 6th day, and they brought back bodies. Seraphina was in the library when the alarm bells rang. 3 sharp strikes that sent guards running toward the main gate. She abandoned the territorial maps she'd been studying and followed the commotion outside. The courtyard was filling with people. Warriors, servants, advisors, everyone drawn by the bells and the shouts. Seraphina pushed through the crowd until she could see the gate. 4 horses, 2 riders. 6 scouts had left. Only 2 came back. The survivors were barely holding themselves upright in their saddles, their clothes torn and blood-stained. One had an arrow still embedded in his shoulder. The other was cradling his left arm at an angle that made Seraphina's stomach turn. Kael was already there, along with Malcor and Hrothgar. The king's face was carved from stone as he helped the wounded scout down from his horse. "Report," Kael ordered. The scout with the arrow in his shoulder spoke through gritted teeth. "Western clans are mobilizing, thousands of them, not raiding parties, armies. We got close enough to count at least 3,000 warriors, maybe more. They're moving east toward the border." The courtyard went dead silent. "What happened to the others?" Malcor asked. "Caught us on the way back. We lost Garrett and Simmons in the first ambush. Marcus and Torrin stayed behind to buy us time." The scout's voice cracked. "They're gone." Hrothgar swore viciously. Kael's expression didn't change, but his hands clenched once before he forced them to relax. "Get them to the healers," he said quietly. "Now." Guards moved to help the wounded men away. The crowd was buzzing with worried whispers. Seraphina stood frozen, watching Kael's face as he turned to Malcor. 3,000 warriors, the king said. "That's not desperation. That's war." Malcor's expression was carefully neutral. "We couldn't have known." "She knew." Kael's voice was soft, but it cut through every other sound in that courtyard. "Lady Seraphina said to investigate before we acted. Said something was pushing them toward our borders. You wanted to burn camps and ask questions later. Your Majesty, with respect, no one could have predicted." "She did predict it." Kael turned to face him fully. "She told us to find out what was happening. We found out. 4 men died finding out. But we found out." The courtyard was silent now, everyone watching, everyone listening. Malcor's pleasant mask slipped just slightly. "We'll need to mobilize immediately. Fortify the border, call in the auxiliary forces." "War Council," Kael interrupted. 1 hour, everyone." He walked away without waiting for a response. Seraphina felt dozens of eyes turned toward her, some grateful, some calculating, and some, particularly from the group standing near Malcor, openly hostile. She'd been right. And in the north, being right didn't always make you friends. The War Council met in a circular chamber deep in the castle's heart. The room was old stone and older strategy. Maps covering every wall, markers showing troop positions, supply routes, defensive strongpoints. Seraphina entered to find she was the only woman in the room. 20 men turned to stare at her. Some she recognized from the feast: Hrothgar, Theron, Darius. Others were new faces, commanders and clan leaders summoned from their territories. "Lady Seraphina," Kael said from the head of the table. "Join us." There was no chair for her. The oversight might have been accidental. Might have been. She stood near the wall instead, in a spot where she could see the main map. Malcor was already talking, his finger tracing lines on the western territories. 3,000 confirmed, possibly more. They're massing here, in the Stonebreak Valley. It's perfect staging ground, sheltered, defendable, close enough to strike our border villages within 2 days' march. "What about their supply lines?" Theron asked. "Unknown. But to field an army that size, they need significant resources. Food, weapons, leadership structure." Malcor looked around the table. "This isn't a spontaneous gathering. Someone's been planning this for months." "Who leads them?" Kael asked. "Reports are unclear. Could be Warlord Grevik, could be someone new. The Western clans haven't unified like this in 20 years. Hrothgar leaned forward. "So what's changed? Why now?" Silence. Everyone looked at each other, at the maps, at anything except admitting they didn't know. Seraphina spoke from her position by the wall. May I see the map of their territory? Every head turned toward her. Malcor's expression was pleasant. Lady Seraphina, perhaps it's best if— Show her the map, Kael said. A younger officer unrolled a detailed chart of the western lands. Seraphina moved closer, studying the terrain. Mountains, valleys, rivers, small villages marked in clusters. What are you looking for? Darius asked. His tone made it clear he thought this was a waste of time. Patterns. She traced the river system with one finger. Your scouts said 3,000 warriors. That's a lot of mouths to feed. Where's their food coming from? They're raiders, Malcor said. They take what they need. From where? Their own villages? She looked up. Show me the raids from the past year. All of them. Theron pulled out another map, this one marked with small red dots. Each one represented an attack on northern territory. Seraphina studied the pattern. The dots clustered near the border but avoided certain areas entirely. They're not raiding food stores. Look, every attack targeted tools, weapons, metal goods, nothing agricultural. So they have food but need weapons, Hrothgar said. That confirms they're preparing for war. Or they have crops but can't harvest them. Seraphina pointed to a cluster of western villages near a major river. These settlements are right on the water, good farming land. But if the river's contaminated or the fields are damaged, they'd have food rotting in the ground and no way to get it out, Kael finished. He moved to stand beside her, studying the map with new intensity. What would contaminate an entire river system? Mining, Seraphina said, or something upstream poisoning the water. If their crops failed, if their people are starving, they'd have two choices, migrate or take resources from someone who has them. That's speculation, Malker said. It fits the facts better than assuming they suddenly decided to attack us for no reason. She looked at Kael. Send scouts to the upper river. See what's happening at the source. More scouts? Darius laughed shortly. We just lost 4 men. You want to send more to their deaths on a theory? I want to understand what we're fighting before we commit to fighting it, Seraphina replied. If they're starving, if this is about survival rather than conquest, that changes everything. How? Malker's voice was sharp now. 3,000 warriors are marching toward our border. Their motivation doesn't change that fact. It changes whether we can negotiate. She turned to face him directly. If they need food, we have food. If they need resources, we can trade. War costs lives. Negotiation costs supplies. You want to negotiate with raiders? Darius was on his feet now. With people who just killed 4 of our scouts? I want to explore every option before we send thousands of our people to die. This is why women shouldn't be in war councils, Darius said. His voice carried contempt like a weapon. Too soft. Too afraid of hard choices. The room erupted. Half the men were shouting agreement, half were shouting at Darius, and Malker sat in the center of it all, looking satisfied. Kael's voice cut through the chaos. Enough! Instant silence. He looked at Seraphina. You think we can negotiate? I think it's worth trying before we start burning villages. And if negotiation fails? Then we fight. But at least we'll know we tried everything else first. Kael studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to address the room. We fortify the border, triple the guard on every village within striking distance. Hrothgar, you take the eastern approaches. Theron, secure the supply routes. And the Western Army? Malker asked. We send an envoy, under flag of truce. The room exploded again. This time Kael let them shout for a few seconds before raising his hand. If they kill our envoy, we have our answer and we mobilize for total war. If they talk, we learn what they want and decide from there. He looked around the table, his expression allowing no argument. We have 3 days before they reach striking distance. That gives us time to try diplomacy and prepare for war simultaneously. Who do you send? Hrothgar asked. Envoys don't usually survive first contact with hostile armies. Kael's eyes moved to Seraphina. Her stomach dropped. No, Malker said immediately. Your Majesty, you can't seriously be considering. I'm not sending her alone. Kael's gaze didn't leave Seraphina's face. I'm going with her, along with a guard of 20 men. We ride tomorrow at dawn. The room erupted in chaos again, but Seraphina barely heard it. She was staring at Kyle, trying to understand what game he was playing. He was either showing incredible faith in her judgment, or he was setting her up to fail spectacularly. Possibly both. Are you insane? Maven had cornered her in the corridor outside the War Council chamber. The older woman's face was tight with worry. That's not my decision, Seraphina said. You suggested negotiation. You put the idea in his head. Maven grabbed her arm, lowering her voice. Do you understand what Malcor just did in there? He let Kyle make this decision. Didn't fight too hard. Do you know why? Because if negotiation fails, you look naive, and Kyle looks weak for listening to you. If you succeed, Malcor can claim he supported the idea from the start. And if you die, which is very possible, he's rid of both problems at once. Seraphina pulled her arm free gently. I know the risks. Do you? Really? Maven's eyes were fierce. You've been here 6 days, girl. 6 days. You don't know these people. Don't know their politics. Don't know how many knives are aimed at your back right now. Then help me survive them. Maven stared at her. Then she laughed, short and bitter. You're serious. I'm here. I'm already in this. I can keep my head down and die slowly from isolation and irrelevance. Or I can fight and maybe die quickly, but at least make a difference first. Seraphina met her eyes. Which would you choose? I'd choose to never be in this position in the first place. That's not an option anymore. Maven was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed. Come with me. If you're riding into hostile territory tomorrow, you need better than that dress. She led Seraphina through a maze of corridors to a room filled with armor and weapons. Most of it was too large, built for warriors twice Seraphina's size, but Maven dug through the back shelves until she found a set of leather armor that might actually fit. Try this. Seraphina stripped off her outer layers and let Maven help her into the armor. It was lighter than she expected, hardened leather reinforced with metal plates at crucial points. Not enough to stop a sword, but enough to deflect glancing blows. It'll do, Maven said, adjusting the straps. You know how to ride. I grew up on horses. Northern horses are different, bigger, meaner. They'll sense if you're afraid. Everything here senses fear, Seraphina said. I'm getting used to it. Maven pulled the last strap tight. One more thing. If this goes wrong, if they attack under the truce flag, you run. You don't try to be brave. You don't try to save anyone. You get on your horse and you ride back here as fast as that animal can carry you. Understood? Why do you care? Maven's hand stilled. Because I've seen 3 women come through here thinking they could change things, thinking they could matter. And I've watched this place break every single one of them. She turned Seraphina around to face her. I'm tired of watching. So don't get yourself killed. That's an order. Seraphina felt something tight in her chest. I'll try. Try harder. She couldn't sleep that night, partially because of nerves, partially because someone was arguing loudly in the corridor outside her room. Seraphina crept to the door and pressed her ear against the wood. Completely reckless. That was Malcor's voice. The decision is made. Kyle sounded tired. You're putting the entire kingdom at risk to prove a point to your new bride. Do you understand how that looks? I'm exploring diplomatic options before committing to a war we might not need to fight. That's leadership, Malcor, not recklessness. Leadership is making hard choices, not listening to a girl who's been here less than a week. That girl predicted this army when you wanted to burn camps. Maybe I should have been listening to her sooner. A pause. Then Malcor's voice, quieter and more dangerous. You're letting her drive a wedge between us. You're doing that yourself. Every time you dismiss her in front of the council, every time you make it clear you don't respect her judgment, you force me to choose between you and her. Don't put me in that position. I've been at your side for 15 years. I know, and I value that, but she's not wrong just because she's new, and you're not right just because you're loyal. Footsteps. Kael's voice moving away. We leave at dawn. Be ready. A long silence. Then Malcor's footsteps, walking in the opposite direction. Seraphina stepped back from the door, her heart pounding. She'd just heard something she wasn't supposed to hear. And from the sound of it, Malcor had just been pushed into a corner. Cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. She should sleep, should rest before tomorrow's ride. But instead she found herself at the window, looking out at the dark mountains and wondering if she'd live long enough to see them again. Sussum. Dawn came cold and gray. The courtyard was full of activity, horses being saddled, weapons being loaded, men checking their gear one final time. Seraphina stood near the gate in her leather armor, feeling exposed and obvious. Kale approached on foot, already armored and armed. His sword hung at his side like it belonged there, probably because it did. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but I'm going anyway." His mouth almost smiled. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me all week." Hrothgar brought their horses, massive northern beasts that made Seraphina's southern mare look like a child's pony. She'd practiced with them yesterday, but mounting one in full view of 20 warriors was different. She got her foot in the stirrup on the second try. Not graceful, but functional. Kale swung onto his horse with the ease of someone who'd been riding since childhood. He raised his voice to address the assembled guard. "We ride under truce flag. No one engages unless attacked first. If we're ambushed, protect the queen and retreat to the castle. Understood?" "Understood." The response was immediate and unified. Queen. He'd called her queen, not lady, not bride. Queen. The title sat strange in her chest. They rode out through the main gate as the sun was breaking over the eastern mountains. 20 armed warriors, one king, and one woman who was either very brave or very stupid. Seraphina still wasn't sure which. The journey took most of the day. They rode west through increasingly rough terrain, following the river that marked the border between Northern Territory and the Western clans. The landscape changed gradually. Fewer trees, more stone, everything sharper and harder. They saw evidence of the mobilization everywhere. Abandoned campsites, tracks from large groups moving east. Once, they passed a burned village that had been hit recently enough that smoke still rose from the ruins. No one spoke. The tension was thick enough to taste. By late afternoon, they reached the designated meeting point, a flat stretch of ground near the river, visible from all sides. Neutral ground. Kale raised his hand, halting the column. He gestured to 2 guards who immediately rode forward carrying a white banner, the traditional flag of truce. They waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sun moved lower. The air grew colder. "Maybe they're not coming," one of the guards muttered. "They're coming," Kale said quietly. "They're watching us right now, deciding if we're worth talking to." He was right. Movement on the far side of the clearing, riders emerging from the tree line. Not 20, not even 50. At least 100 warriors, all armed, all moving with the coordinated precision of a trained force. Seraphina's horse shifted nervously beneath her. She tightened her grip on the reins. The Western army stopped about 50 yards away. Their leader rode forward alone, a massive man with scars crossing his face and arms thick as tree trunks. He looked at Kael, then at Seraphina, then back to Kael. "You brought a woman to a war negotiation." His voice carried across the clearing. "Is this a joke?" "This is my queen," Kael replied. "And she's the one who suggested we talk instead of kill each other. Show some respect." The warrior laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "Respect is earned, Northern King, not demanded." "Then let's earn it." Kael dismounted. "You wanted our attention. You have it. Now tell me why 3,000 warriors are marching toward my border." "We're starving." The blunt answer seemed to surprise Kael. He'd been expecting threats, demands, anything except simple honesty. The Western leader continued. "The mines upriver, your mines. They dumped poison into our water 3 months ago, killed our crops, killed our livestock, killed our children." His voice was flat, but rage burned behind it. "We asked for help. Sent envoys. You ignored us." "I never received any envoys." "Then someone intercepted them. Someone in your court who wanted this war." The warrior's eyes were hard. "We don't care anymore. We need food and we need land. You can give it to us voluntarily, or we can take it by force. Your choice." Seraphina spoke before Kael could respond. "Show me proof." The warrior turned his attention to her. "What?" "Proof. You say our mines poisoned your water. Show me evidence." "You calling me a liar, girl?" I'm calling you a warlord who needs resources and has a convenient story to justify taking them. She kept her voice steady, despite her pounding heart. If you have proof, show it. If you don't, this is just an invasion wrapped in justification. The clearing went silent. Every warrior on both sides was watching. The Western leader stared at her for a long moment, then he gestured behind him. One of his men rode forward carrying a leather satchel. 3 envoys we sent to your court, the warrior said. This is what came back. He opened the satchel and dumped the contents on the ground. 3 heads rolled into the dirt, rotted but recognizable, northern arrows still embedded in their skulls. Seraphina's stomach turned, but she forced herself to look, to really see what was in front of her. Northern arrows, northern execution style. Someone in Kael's court had killed these envoys and made sure the Western clans would blame the king. Those are my arrows, Kael said quietly. His voice was different now, dangerous. My signature fletching, but I never gave the order to kill envoys. Then someone in your house is starting this war for you, the Western leader said, and we don't care who. All we know is our people are dying and yours refuse to help, so we're taking what we need. Kael looked at Seraphina. She could see the question in his eyes. This was the moment, the choice. Fight or negotiate. She thought about Malkor's pleasant smile, his careful dismissal of every idea she'd offered, his resistance to sending scouts, his insistence on burning first and asking questions later, and she thought about 3 severed heads with northern arrows in their skulls. Give them food, she said. What? That came from multiple sources. Kael, the guards, even the Western warriors. Give them food and access to clean water from our northern wells, enough to see their people through winter. In exchange, they withdraw their army and give us time to investigate who killed their envoys. The Western leader laughed. And why would we trust you to investigate anything? Because I'm going to find whoever ordered this and make sure everyone knows about it. She looked at Kael. Publicly, in front of both our peoples. No secrets, no politics, just truth. You're promising to find a traitor in my court, Kael said slowly. That's not a small promise. I know. She met his eyes. But if we don't make it, we're fighting a war that someone else started for their own purposes. And they'll be sitting safe in your castle while our people die in the field. Kael was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to the Western leader. 3 months' supplies, delivered to your border villages within the week. In exchange, you withdraw your army and give us 6 weeks to find who killed your envoys. And if you don't find them, then we meet again and you can decide if you believe we tried. Kael's expression was hard. But if you attack our villages before then, the deal is void and we bury you. The Western leader considered this. His warriors were muttering behind him, some arguing for attack, some for accepting the offer. Finally, he nodded. 6 weeks. But if you fail to deliver the supplies or fail to find the traitor, we burn everything between here and your capital. Understood? Understood. They sealed it with a wrist clasp, the traditional binding of an agreement between warriors. Then the Western army withdrew, disappearing back into the forest like they'd never been there. Kael stood in the clearing for a long moment, looking at the 3 severed heads. Then he turned to his guards. Bring them. We're taking them back to the castle. Your Majesty, I said bring them. His voice was ice. Someone's going to answer for this, and everyone's going to see what happens to traitors in my court. The ride back was silent and grim. Seraphina couldn't stop thinking about those heads, about the arrows, about Malkor's satisfied expression when the war council had erupted in chaos. She didn't have proof, not yet, but she had a theory, and 6 weeks to prove it or watch everything burn. They reached the castle after nightfall. The courtyard was full of people waiting for news. Had there been a battle? Had the king survived? What happened? Kael dismounted and gestured for 2 guards to bring forward the satchel containing the evidence. Summon the full court, he ordered. Now, everyone. I don't care if they're sleeping. Get them to the Great Hall immediately. Word spread fast. Within 30 minutes, the hall was packed. Nobles, warriors, servants, advisors, everyone crammed in to see what the king would say. Malkor stood near the front, his expression carefully neutral. Kale placed the satchel on the floor in front of the throne. Then he looked out at his assembled court. The Western clans were mobilizing because someone in this court murdered their envoys and made it look like I gave the order. His voice carried to every corner of the hall. 3 men who came in peace were executed with northern arrows and sent back to their people as a message. He opened the satchel. The heads rolled onto the floor. Several people gasped. Someone near the back retched. Someone here did this, Kale continued. Someone wanted this war, and I'm going to find out who. Malcor stepped forward. Your Majesty, with respect, how do we know the Western clans didn't stage this themselves? Create false evidence to justify their attack? We don't, Kale admitted, which is why we investigate. Thoroughly. Starting with who had access to my arrows and who stood to gain from war with the West. That's half the court, Malcor said. Many people benefit from military contracts, supply deals. Then we narrow it down. Kale looked at Seraphina. The Queen will lead the investigation. The hall erupted. Seraphina felt the weight of 100 eyes turned toward her. Hostile eyes, suspicious eyes. Eyes that saw her as an outsider making accusations against people who'd served the crown for decades. Malcor's expression never changed, but his eyes went flat and cold. The Queen, he said carefully, has been in the North for less than a week. With respect, she doesn't have the experience. She predicted the Western army, suggested negotiation instead of immediate war, and she's not connected to any existing power structures in this court. Kale's voice was final, which makes her the only person I can trust to investigate without bias. Your Majesty, the decision is made, Malcor. Kale looked around the hall. You have 6 weeks to find the truth, Seraphina. Whatever it costs, whoever it is, I want them found. He left the hall, taking most of his personal guard with him. Seraphina stood alone in front of a court full of people who now had every reason to want her dead. Malcor approached slowly, his pleasant smile back in place. Quite a task the king's given you. I'll manage. I'm sure you'll try. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. But investigations require access, information, cooperation from people who've been here a lot longer than you. And right now, I'd say your list of allies is very short. Is that a threat, General? It's an observation. He stepped back, raising his voice to normal volume. Of course, if you need any assistance, my resources are at your disposal. For the good of the kingdom. He walked away, taking his supporters with him. Hrothgar appeared at her elbow. You just made yourself the most dangerous person in this castle. I noticed. Good. Because Malcor's going to try to destroy you before you can destroy him, and he's very good at it. Hrothgar looked around the hall at the dispersing crowd. You need allies, fast, people who can watch your back while you're digging through records. Why are you helping me? Because I'm tired of watching Malcor run this kingdom from behind the throne, and because you're the first person in years who's had the spine to stand up to him. He clapped her on the shoulder. Don't waste it by getting yourself killed in the first week. Maven appeared on her other side. Your room's been moved. East Tower, top floor. Better security. I've stationed 2 guards I trust at your door. I didn't ask for that. You didn't have to. You just accused someone powerful of treason in front of the entire court. If they don't try to kill you, I'll be shocked. Maven's expression was grim. 6 weeks. That's not much time. Then I'd better get started. Seraphina walked out of that hall knowing several things with absolute clarity. She had 6 weeks to find a traitor. Half the court wanted her to fail, and Malcor Vesh had just become the most dangerous enemy she'd ever faced. The game had started the moment she challenged him at that first feast. But now the stakes were clear. Find the truth and save the kingdom. Or fail and watch it burn. There was no sleeping that night either. Seraphina sat in her new room in the East Tower, surrounded by documents Maven had smuggled from the record archives. Supply ledgers, arrow requisition forms, guard rotation schedules from 3 months ago when the Western envoys would have arrived. The candles burned low. Her eyes ached, and she still had nothing concrete. Someone knocked. 3 quick raps followed by 2 slow ones. The signal Maven had established. Come in. Hrothgar entered, looking grim. He dropped a leather folder on her desk. Found this in the armory records. Thought you'd want to see it. Seraphina opened the folder. Inside were requisition forms for arrows, specifically arrows with the king's personal fletching. 3 months ago, someone had ordered 200 arrows made to Kael's exact specifications. Who signed for them? She asked. That's the interesting part. Hrothgar leaned against the wall. The signature's been damaged, water-stained supposedly, but conveniently, it's unreadable. Convenient. Seraphina held the paper up to the candlelight. The signature was definitely obscured, but the damage pattern looked wrong, too precise, too targeted. This wasn't water. Someone burned it. Carefully. Can you tell who it was originally? She studied the remaining ink strokes. The signature had been long, flowing, confident. Someone who signs their name often. Someone important enough that a requisition for the king's arrows wouldn't raise questions. That narrows it down to about 15 people. 15 people who could order arrows without suspicion. Seraphina set the paper down. How many of them would benefit from a war with the West? All of them, in different ways. War means contracts, promotions, glory, political leverage. Hrothgar rubbed his face tiredly. You're looking for someone smart enough to cover their tracks and powerful enough that people don't ask questions. That sounds like Malcor. She said it quietly, but it hung in the room like an accusation. You can't prove it. Not yet. Seraphina. Hrothgar's voice was serious now. Even suggesting it without proof will get you killed. Malcor has supporters everywhere. The guard, the court, the military command structure. If you accuse him, and you're wrong, or even if you're right but can't prove it, he'll destroy you. I know. Do you? Really? He pushed off the wall, frustration bleeding into his tone. Because, from where I'm standing, you've been here a week, and you're already investigating the second most powerful man in the kingdom for treason. That's not brave. That's suicidal. What would you have me do? Ignore it? I'd have you be smart about it. Build your case slowly. Find allies who can protect you while you dig. I have 6 weeks, Hrothgar. I don't have time to be slow. A longer knock at the door. Maven's voice came through. Captain Darius is asking questions about your investigation. Says the king wants a progress report. The king's asleep, Seraphina called back. I know that, you know that. Darius is fishing. Hrothgar swore under his breath. He's Malcor's creature. Whatever you tell him goes straight back to the general. Then I'll tell him nothing useful. Seraphina stood, gathering the documents. How many people can I actually trust in this castle? Besides me and Maven? Hrothgar counted on his fingers. Theron's loyal to Kael, not Malcor. A few of the younger guards might be convinced, and there's someone else you should talk to. Who? The king's record keeper, man named Idris. He's been cataloging court documents for 30 years. If anyone knows where bodies are buried, it's him. Will he talk to me? He hates Malcor, so probably. Maven opened the door a crack. Darius is coming up the stairs. You want me to stall him? No. Seraphina moved to the door. Let him ask his questions. I'll give him answers that won't help anyone. Hrothgar grabbed her arm. Be careful. Darius looks stupid, but he's not. He's watching for mistakes. Then I won't make any. She stepped into the corridor just as Darius reached the landing. He was in full armor despite the late hour, his hand resting casually on his sword hilt. Lady Seraphina, working late? Someone has to. She kept her voice neutral. Was there something you needed, Captain? Just checking on your progress. The king mentioned you're investigating the envoy murders. I am. Found anything interesting? Several things. None I'm prepared to discuss yet. His smile was sharp. The general's concerned. Says an investigation like this requires military expertise. He's offered to assign some of his men to assist you. How generous. Tell the general I appreciate the offer, but I have the help I need. Do you? Darius glanced past her into the room, clearly trying to see what documents she had. Because from what I hear, you're just reading old supply records. That's not exactly detective work. Investigation starts with information, Captain. I'm gathering information. For 6 weeks? Seems inefficient. Then it's fortunate I don't answer to you. She stepped forward, forcing him to either move back or stand too close. He moved back. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. Of course. He smiled again, all teeth and no warmth. Just remember, the clock's ticking. 6 weeks goes fast when you don't know what you're looking for. He left, his footsteps echoing down the stone stairs. Hrothgar appeared in the doorway. He's going to report everything you just said to Malcor. Good. Let him think I'm floundering in paperwork. The less threatening I seem, the more careless he might become, or the more confident he'll get about removing you. That's a risk I'll have to take. Seraphina returned to her desk. Where can I find this Edris? Archives, below the main library, but he doesn't keep regular hours. Then I'll go now, before Malcor decides to have those archives cleaned out. Maven stepped in, carrying a cloak and a knife. Take these, and take one of the guards from your door. The castle's dangerous at night. I'll go with her, Hrothgar said. You're too visible. If Malcor's people see you helping her, it compromises both of you. Maven handed Seraphina the knife. Take Garrett. He's young, but he's trustworthy. And he owes me a favor. What? The archives were exactly as unwelcoming as Seraphina had expected. Stone corridors lined with shelves that disappeared into darkness. The smell of old paper and leather bindings. And cold. The kind of cold that seeped into your bones and stayed there. Garrett, the young guard Maven had sent, held a torch and looked nervous. Are you sure about this, my lady? These archives go back centuries. You could get lost down here. Then stay close. They moved deeper into the labyrinth of shelves. Seraphina was looking for any sign of life. Candlelight, movement, the sound of pages turning. She found Edris in a back corner, surrounded by stacks of documents that looked dangerously close to toppling. He was ancient, probably 70, with white hair and eyes that were sharp despite his age. Who's disturbing my work? He snapped without looking up. Someone who needs your help. He looked up then, studying her. The Southern Queen. Maven said you might come. She told you about me? Maven tells me everything. We've known each other 40 years. He set down his quill. You're investigating the envoy murders. Specifically, you're looking for proof that someone in the court ordered them killed. Can you help me? Depends. Who do you suspect? Seraphina hesitated. This was the moment. Either she trusted this old man, or she walked away with nothing. General Malcor Vesh. Edris laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Took you long enough. I've suspected him for years. Years? The man's brilliant and ambitious. Dangerous combination. Edris stood, moving to a specific shelf with the certainty of someone who knew every document in his archives. 3 months ago, someone accessed the royal seal records. They were looking for the king's arrow specifications. I noted it because it was unusual. The seal records aren't normally consulted except for official commissions. Who accessed them? The log says Captain Darius, but the handwriting's wrong. Someone else signed his name. Seraphina felt her pulse quicken. Do you know whose handwriting it actually is? I have suspicions, but suspicions aren't proof. He pulled down a leather-bound book, flipping through pages. However, I do have this. Payment records for the armory. 3 months ago, someone authorized a special commission, 200 arrows, king's specification, rush order. The payment came from a discretionary military fund. Who controls that fund? The general does, but he's authorized to delegate spending to his captains. So he could claim Darius ordered the arrows without his knowledge. Exactly. Plausible deniability. Edris found the page he was looking for. But here's where it gets interesting. The same fund was used 2 weeks earlier to pay for something else. Poison. Specifically, the kind used to contaminate water sources. The pieces clicked together in Seraphina's mind. The Western clan said our mines poisoned their river. And our mines haven't used that kind of chemical processing in 5 years. We switched to cleaner methods because the old poison was killing our own workers. Edris closed the book. But someone wanted the Western clans to think we'd poisoned them. So they purchased the poison, used it to contaminate their water, and made sure it looked like it came from us. That's not just murder, that's genocide. That's strategy. Poison the water, kill the envoys when they come asking for help, watch the Western clans mobilize for war. Then step in as the brilliant general who crushes the threat and saves the kingdom. Idris's expression was grim. Malcor would be the hero. The king would owe him everything, and anyone who opposed him would look like a traitor for questioning the man who saved them all. Seraphina sat down heavily on a nearby stool. Why didn't you report this? To who? Malcor controls the guard. He has supporters in every level of the court. The king trusts him completely. Edris's eyes were sad. I'm just an old man with theories and partial evidence. If I'd accused him, I'd be dead within a week, and my archives would burn the day after. But you kept the records. Someone had to. I hoped eventually the right person would come asking the right questions. He looked at her directly. Are you that person, Seraphina Varel? Or are you just another pawn who'll be sacrificed when the real game starts? I'm the person who's going to stop him. Bold words. Do you have a plan? I'm working on it. Work faster. Because if Malcor realizes you're getting close to the truth, he won't wait for you to build your case. He'll eliminate you and claim it was a tragic accident. Garrett shifted nervously near the door. My lady, we should go. We've been down here too long. Seraphina stood. Can I take these records? Too risky. If Malcor's people search your room and find them, you're finished. Edris moved to a different shelf, pulling out a blank journal. But you can take this. I've made notes. Dates, amounts, discrepancies. Enough to guide your investigation. Memorize what you can, hide it well, and burn it if you're compromised. She took the journal. It was thin but densely written. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. All I've given you is a death warrant if Malcor finds out. He returned to his desk. And Seraphina, whatever you're planning, do it fast. 6 weeks seems like a long time. It's not. They made it halfway back to her tower before the ambush. 3 men in guard uniforms stepped out of a side corridor, blocking their path. Not guards, she recognized. Garrett's hand went to his sword immediately. State your business. Captain Darius wants to see Lady Seraphina, now. The lady's tired. It can wait until morning. It can't. The lead man smiled. He had a scar across his throat that looked like someone had tried to kill him once and failed. Captain's orders. I don't answer to Captain Darius, Seraphina said. You do tonight. They moved forward. Garrett drew his sword, stepping in front of Seraphina. Back off. Stand down, boy. This doesn't concern you. Everything concerning the Queen concerns me. The scarred man sighed. Then he nodded to his companions. They attacked. Garrett was good, better than Seraphina had expected. He blocked the first strike, parried the second, and actually managed to cut one of the attackers across the arm. But he was 1 against 3, and they weren't trying to arrest him. They were trying to kill him. Seraphina pulled the knife Maven had given her. It felt small and inadequate in her hand, but it was better than nothing. One of the men noticed her armed and laughed. What are you going to do with that, girl? She didn't answer, just waited. Garrett went down hard, a sword pommel to the back of his head. He crumpled and didn't get up. The 3 men turned to face her. Now, the scarred one said pleasantly, you can come quietly, or we can drag you. Your choice. Why does Darius want to see me? Didn't say, just said to bring you. And if I refuse? Then we get creative about convincing you. They spread out, surrounding her, professional, coordinated. This wasn't improvised. They'd done this before. Seraphina's mind raced. She could scream, but who would come? Malcor's people controlled most of the guard. She could run, but they were faster and knew the castle better. She could fight, but that would end exactly one way. So she did the only thing that might work. She dropped the knife. Fine. Take me to him. The scarred man looked surprised, then pleased. Smart choice. They grabbed her arms, not gentle, but not brutal either, and marched her through the castle corridors. Not toward Darius's quarters, toward the lower levels, toward the dungeons. Fear spiked through her chest, but she kept her expression calm. Whatever was about to happen, she needed to be ready for it. They descended 2 flights of stairs, the air growing colder and damper, then down a corridor lined with empty cells. At the end, lamplight spilled from an open door. They pushed her inside. The room was small, stone-walled, with a single table and 2 chairs. Darius stood near the far wall, arms crossed, looking pleased with himself. Leave us, he told the guards. They hesitated. Sir, the general said. I said leave us. Wait outside. The men left, closing the door behind them. Darius studied Seraphina for a long moment. Then he smiled. Sit. I'll stand. Suit yourself. He moved to the table, pouring wine into 2 cups. You're making things very difficult, Lady Seraphina. The general tried to help you, offered resources, support, cooperation. You refused. Why? Because I don't need his help. Everyone needs help, especially someone investigating treason in a hostile court. He offered her one of the cups. Drink. It's not poisoned. I'm not thirsty. Fine. He drank from both cups, proving his point, then set them down. Let me be direct. You're not going to find what you're looking for. The evidence doesn't exist. You're chasing shadows. You seem very certain of that. I am certain, because I know who killed those envoys. Seraphina's heart stopped. Who? Raiders, bandits operating near the border. They killed the envoys, stole their belongings, and dumped the bodies where the Western clans would find them. It was opportunistic violence, not political conspiracy. With northern arrows? Stolen from our supply caravans. Happens all the time. Darius leaned against the table. There's no grand conspiracy here. Just bad luck and worse timing. The sooner you accept that and report it to the king, the sooner we can all move on. And if I don't accept it? His expression hardened. Then you're willfully obstructing military operations and undermining the kingdom's security. That's grounds for arrest. You're threatening to arrest the queen? I'm warning you that continuing this investigation will end badly. For you, for your reputation, for your future in this court. He moved closer. General Malcor's been very patient with you, but his patience has limits. Accept the raider theory, close the investigation, and go back to being the king's pretty wife. Everyone wins. Except the Western clans who were actually poisoned. That's a separate issue, one that doesn't concern you. Seraphina looked at him, at his confident smile, his casual posture, his absolute certainty that she would fold, and she made a decision that would either save her or destroy her. No. Darius blinked. What? No, I'm not closing the investigation. I'm not accepting your raider theory, and I'm not backing down. She met his eyes. Because I know what actually happened. I have evidence, and I'm going to expose everyone involved. His smile disappeared. You're bluffing. Am I? Then why did you bring me down here? Why the private conversation, the threats, the careful explanation of how this is all just a tragic misunderstanding? She took a step toward him. You're scared. Not of me, of what I might find, of who I might prove was responsible. You have nothing. I have enough, and I'll have more by the time I'm done. Darius's hand moved to his sword hilt. You're making a mistake. Probably, but it's my mistake to make. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Darius moved to the door, yanking it open. Take her back to her room, and make sure she stays there. The guards grabbed her again, rougher this time. They dragged her back through the corridors and up the stairs. When they reached her tower, they shoved her inside and slammed the door. She heard the lock turn, heard heavy footsteps as they positioned themselves outside. She was under house arrest. Seraphina moved to the window, looking out at the dark castle. Somewhere out there, Garrett was unconscious, or worse. Maven and Hrothgar didn't know what had happened, and Malcor now knew she was getting too close to the truth. The journal Edris had given her was still hidden in her cloak. She pulled it out, moving to her desk. She had maybe hours before Malcor made his next move. Maybe less. Time to stop being careful. Time to be ruthless. She opened the journal and started reading. No. 3 hours later, someone knocked on her door. Not the signal, just regular knocking. Who is it? Theron, let me in. She recognized his voice. The quiet naval commander from the War Council, one of the few people Hrothgar had said might be trustworthy. I'm locked in. I know, I'm unlocking it. The door swung open. Theron stood there looking grim, 2 unconscious guards at his feet. Are they dead? Sleeping. I'm not interested in killing the king's men if I can avoid it. He stepped inside, closing the door. Maven sent me. Said you were arrested. House arrest. There's a difference. Not much of one. He looked around the room, spotting the journal on her desk. Is that what I think it is? Evidence. Enough to prove someone in the court engineered the Western conflict. Can you prove it was Malcor? Not conclusively. Not yet. She closed the journal. but I can prove the poison came from military discretionary funds, that the arrows were specially commissioned, that someone deliberately created a war for political gain. That's not enough. Malker will claim it was Darius acting independently, or blame some dead officer who can't defend himself. Theron's expression was serious. You need direct proof, something that ties Malkor personally to the orders. I know, I just don't have it. Then get it. He moved to the window. There's going to be a supply convoy leaving tomorrow morning, heading west to deliver the food we promised the clans. Malker's going to be inspecting it personally before it leaves. Why does that matter? Because while he's distracted with the convoy, his private quarters will be empty, his office, his personal records. Theron looked at her. If there's proof, that's where it'll be. You're suggesting I break into the general's office? I'm saying you're running out of time and out of options. In 4 weeks, the Western clans will come asking if we found the traitor. If you can't give them an answer, people die. A lot of people. He pulled a key from his pocket. This opens the secondary entrance to the officer's wing. Maven got it from a guard she trusts. Use it. Find what you need. And don't get caught. If I'm caught, you won't be. Because I'll be creating a distraction in the eastern courtyard. Something loud enough to pull most of the guard away from their posts. But he handed her the key. You'll have maybe 30 minutes. Use them well. Why are you helping me? Because Malkor's been running this kingdom from behind the throne for too long, and because I think you might actually have the spine to stop him. He moved to the door. Tomorrow, dawn, be ready. He left, dragging the unconscious guards with him. Seraphina sat down, the key heavy in her hand. This was insane. Breaking into the general's quarters was beyond risky. It was suicidal. If she was caught, Malkor would have all the justification he needed to have her arrested, tried, and executed for treason. But Theron was right. She was running out of time, out of options. And if there was proof that Malkor had orchestrated everything, the poisoning, the murders, the war, it would be in his private records. She had one chance, one window, one decision that would either expose the truth or get her killed. Tomorrow at dawn, she'd make that choice. Tonight, she needed to prepare. Dawn came too fast and not fast enough. Seraphina, dressed in dark clothes Maven had left for her, strapped the knife to her belt and waited by her window. Below, she could see activity in the courtyard, the supply convoy being loaded, guards checking the cargo, and Malkor himself overseeing the entire operation. Right on schedule. She slipped out of her room, using the key Theron had given her. The corridors were quieter than usual. Most of the guard had been pulled to oversee the convoy or respond to whatever distraction Theron was about to create. She made it to the officer's wing without being seen. The secondary entrance was exactly where Theron had said, a narrow door hidden behind a tapestry. The key worked smoothly, well-oiled, and silent. Inside, the corridor was lined with doors. Officers' quarters, each marked with a nameplate. At the end, General Malkor Vesh. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. This was the moment. The choice. She tried the door. Locked. Of course it was locked. She pulled a thin piece of metal from her belt, something Hrothgar had given her last night with minimal explanation. Maven says you might need this. Don't ask where she got it. The lock was complex but not impossible. She worked carefully, listening for footsteps, waiting for the click that meant, there. The door swung open. Malkor's office was exactly what she'd expected. Organized, efficient, intimidating, maps covered one wall, weapons decorated another, and in the center a massive desk covered in documents. Seraphina moved quickly, scanning the papers. Supply orders, troop movements, letters from various commanders, nothing incriminating. She checked the drawers. More of the same. Everything meticulously documented, everything official and proper. Too proper. Malkor was too smart to leave evidence sitting on his desk, which meant it was hidden. She felt along the edges of the drawers, looking for false bottoms, checked behind the maps for hidden compartments, knocked on the walls, listening for hollow spaces. Nothing. Minutes were ticking past. The distraction wouldn't last forever. Think. Where would a paranoid, brilliant general hide evidence of treason? Her eyes fell on the bookshelf. Rows of military manuals, historical texts, strategic treatises. She started pulling books, checking behind them. Still nothing. Then she noticed one book that didn't quite fit. The spine was the same style as the others, but slightly thicker. She pulled it. Not a book. A box disguised as a book. Inside were letters, correspondence written in code. And underneath the letters, a small leather journal. Seraphina opened it. The first page nearly stopped her heart. Operational Timeline, Western Campaign. She flipped through quickly, her hands shaking. Every page was detailed planning. The poison purchase, the envoy execution, the timing of the Western Army's mobilization. Every single piece of the conspiracy laid out in Malcor's own handwriting. And at the end, a final note. Once the Western threat is neutralized and I am confirmed as military hero, remove final obstacles to full control. Priority targets. King Kael Draven, Queen Seraphina Varel, Commander Rothgar. She was reading her own death warrant. Footsteps in the corridor. Seraphina shoved the journal inside her tunic, replaced the fake book, and dove behind the desk just as the door opened. Malcor's voice, talking to someone. Should only take a moment. I need to retrieve something before we depart. He was here. In the room, 10 feet away. She pressed herself against the floor, barely breathing. She heard him moving around the office, opening drawers, shuffling papers. Then silence. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. You can come out now, Seraphina. I know you're here. Her blood turned to ice. She didn't move. I can see your shadow behind the desk, and you left the hidden book slightly out of alignment, careless. His footsteps moved closer. Stand up, slowly, hands where I can see them. There was no other option. She stood. Malcor stood 5 feet away, his sword drawn and pointed directly at her chest. His expression was calm, almost pleasant. You found it, he said. I'm impressed. Most people would never have located that compartment. It's over, Malcor. Is it? I don't think so. He gestured toward her tunic where she'd hidden the journal. Give it to me. So you can destroy the evidence? So I can show you why you've already lost. He smiled. Give it to me, or I'll take it from your corpse. Your choice. She pulled the journal out slowly, holding it in front of her. Toss it here. She did. He caught it one-handed, never taking his eyes or his sword off her. You were right, he said, flipping through the pages. About all of it, the poison, the envoys, the war, I engineered the entire thing. Why? Because Kael is weak, soft. He listens to advisors, considers options, seeks peaceful solutions. Malcor's voice dripped contempt. The North doesn't need a philosopher king. It needs a warrior, someone willing to make hard choices, someone willing to do what's necessary. Mass murder isn't necessary. It's monstrous. It's strategy. The Western clans would have been a threat eventually. I just accelerated the timeline and ensured we destroy them from a position of strength. He tucked the journal into his belt. And once they're eliminated, I become the hero who saved the kingdom. The people will demand I be given more authority, more control. Kael will have no choice but to grant it. And then you'll kill him too. Eventually, once his usefulness has expired. He studied her almost curiously. You really thought you could stop me? A girl who's been here 2 weeks? I found your journal. I know the truth. Others will too. Who? Maven? Rothgar? Theron? He laughed. I already know about them. They're being arrested as we speak for conspiracy and treason, along with that old fool Edris. Seraphina felt the floor drop out from under her. No. Your allies are gone. Your evidence is in my possession, and you're about to have a tragic accident. He raised his sword. Such a shame. The new queen, unable to handle the pressures of northern life, threw herself from the tower window in despair. Everyone will be so saddened. Kael will never believe that. Kael will believe what I tell him. He always has. Malcor moved forward. Any last words? The door exploded inward. Kael stood in the doorway, sword drawn, eyes blazing. Behind him, Rothgar and a dozen loyal guards. Drop your weapon, Malcor. Now! Malcor didn't move. His sword stayed pointed at Seraphina. Your Majesty, this isn't what it looks like. It looks like you're threatening to kill my wife in your office while holding a journal that I'm betting contains all sorts of interesting confessions. Kael took a step forward. Drop your weapon. She broke into my quarters, Attempted to steal classified military documents. I was defending myself. She was investigating treason, on my orders. Kael's voice was ice. And from what I'm hearing, she found it. Now drop the sword or I'll cut you down where you stand. Malkor's pleasant mask finally cracked. Rage twisted his features. You'd believe her? A girl you've known for 2 weeks over me? Over 15 years of loyalty? Loyalty? Kael laughed bitterly. Theron brought me your contingency plans last night. The ones where you arrange my convenient death after you've secured power? That's not loyalty, Malkor. That's ambition. You read my private. You engineered a war, murdered envoys, poisoned an entire region, and planned to kill me. Kael's sword never wavered. Last chance. Drop your weapon. Malkor looked at Seraphina, at Kael, at the guards blocking the exit. Then he smiled. If I can't have this kingdom, neither can you. He moved faster than Seraphina expected, his blade cutting toward her throat. Kael's sword intercepted it, the clash of steel echoing through the room. Run! Kael shouted at her. Seraphina dove past them as Kael and Malkor fought. But instead of running, she grabbed a sword from one of the guards. The fight was brutal. Malkor was brilliant, every strike precise, every defense calculated. But Kael fought with rage and betrayal fueling every blow. Malkor drove Kael back toward the window, their blades locked. You were supposed to be great. I made you great. And this is how you repay me? You made me a puppet. Kael broke the lock, striking hard. I'm taking my kingdom back. He drove Malkor backward, step by step, until the general's back was against the bookshelf. Surrender, Kael said. Face trial. Accept justice. Malkor looked at him with pure hatred. Then he looked at Seraphina. She'll destroy you. She already has. Then I'll be destroyed, but at least I'll be free. Malkor lunged. Kael sidestepped and struck. One clean blow that sent Malkor's sword clattering across the floor. The general stood there, disarmed, bleeding from a cut across his shoulder. Arrest him, Kael ordered. Guards moved forward with chains. Malkor didn't resist, just smiled that pleasant, poisonous smile. This isn't over. Yes, it is. They dragged him away, still smiling, still unbroken. The room went quiet. Kael lowered his sword, breathing hard. Then he looked at Seraphina. Are you hurt? No. Good. He picked up the journal Malkor had dropped. Is this what I think it is? Complete confession. Every detail of the conspiracy. He flipped through it, his expression darkening with every page. When he finished, he looked sick. 15 years. I trusted him for 15 years. I'm sorry. Don't be. You were right. About everything. He closed the journal. The Western clans need to see this. Need to know we found the traitor. Will they believe it? They'll have to. It's the truth. He looked at her directly. You saved this kingdom, Seraphina. You understand that? She shook her head. We're not saved yet. Malkor has supporters. The conspiracy might run deeper than just him. Then we root them out, together. He offered his hand. No more secrets, no more games. From now on, we do this as equals. She took his hand. But even as they left that office, even as guards rushed to secure Malkor in the deepest cell, Seraphina couldn't shake one thought. Malkor's smile as they dragged him away. That wasn't the expression of a man who'd lost. That was the expression of a man who still had one more move to make. That smile haunted her for the rest of the day. Seraphina stood in the War Council chamber, watching as Kael laid Malkor's journal on the table for the assembled commanders to see. Hrothgar was there, one eye swollen shut from whatever fight had happened during his arrest. Theron sat quietly, his hands bandaged. Maven stood near the wall, her expression unreadable. And Darius was conspicuously absent. He ran, Hrothgar said when Kael asked. The moment he heard Malkor was arrested, he took 3 loyal guards and disappeared, probably heading for the border. Let him go, Kael said. We have bigger problems. He opened the journal to a marked page. According to this, Malkor has supporters embedded throughout the military structure. Officers who've been bought, blackmailed, or convinced that his vision for the North is the right one. How many? Theron asked. At least 40 confirmed. Probably more. Kael's expression was grim. And they're positioned strategically. supply masters, garrison commanders, captains of key fortifications. A coup, Maven said quietly. He was planning a coup. Is planning, Seraphina corrected. That smile when they arrested him? He's not finished. Every head turned toward her. She's right, Hrothgar said. Malcor doesn't lose gracefully. If he's smiling, it's because he has contingencies. What kind of contingencies? Kyle asked. Seraphina moved to the table, flipping through the journal. He mentions final protocols several times, always in reference to being compromised or arrested, but he never details what they are. Dead man's switches, Theron said. Orders that execute automatically if he's removed from power. What kind of orders? The kind that hurt us badly enough that we have to release him to stop the damage. Theron leaned forward. Could be assassination, sabotage, information releases, anything that causes enough chaos to force negotiation. Kyle swore. We need to find out what he's planned, fast. He won't tell us, Hrothgar said. Malcor would die before giving up leverage. Then we don't ask him. Seraphina looked at Maven. Who were his closest allies? The people he'd trust with executing these protocols? Besides Darius? Maven thought for a moment. Captain Vorden, commander of the Western Garrison. Master Kellen, in charge of the armory. And probably someone in the castle guard. Someone close enough to monitor what's happening inside these walls. Start with the guard, Cale ordered. Find out who's been acting strange. Who's been asking unusual questions. Who seems too interested in what we're doing. Hrothgar stood. I'll handle it. Carefully, Seraphina warned. If Malcor's people realize we're looking for them, they might trigger whatever he's planned just to prevent us from stopping it. Noted. Hrothgar left with 2 guards. Kyle turned to Theron. What about the Western clans? They're expecting answers. They're expecting justice, Theron corrected. We promised them the traitor. We have him. We need to deliver on that promise. But we also need them to see the evidence, Seraphina said. If they just hear that we arrested someone, they might think we're scapegoating a convenient target. They need to see the journal, hear the details, understand that this was real. You want to bring their leaders here? Maven asked. I want them to witness his trial, public, transparent, with all evidence presented openly. Seraphina looked at Kyle. Show them we're serious about justice, about truth. Kale was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Send word to the Western clans. Tell them we've found the traitor and we're inviting their leadership to observe the trial. 3 days from now. That's not much time to prepare, Theron said. It's enough, and it shows we're not trying to hide anything or manipulate the evidence. Cale picked up Malcor's journal. 3 days. Then we end this. The castle became a different place overnight. Guards were questioned, rotations were changed, loyalties were tested. Seraphina moved through the corridors, watching people watch her, some with respect now, some with fear, and some, a concerning number, with barely concealed hostility. Malcor's supporters were still here, still embedded, still waiting. She found Maven in the kitchen courtyard, supervising food preparation with the intensity of a military commander. You're going to wear yourself out, Seraphina said. Better than sitting still and waiting for someone to poison the king's dinner. Maven didn't look up from the vegetables she was inspecting. I've already found 2 servants with loyalties to Malcor. Sent them packing before they could cause trouble. How did you know? Been doing this for 30 years. You learn to spot the signs. Who's too nervous? Who's asking the wrong questions? Who suddenly has more money than they should? She finally looked at Seraphina. You did good work finding that journal, but you understand what happens next, right? Trial, justice, peace with the Western clans. Optimistic. Maven set down the vegetables. What actually happens is Malcor stands in front of the court and tries to turn his trial into theater. He'll paint himself as the loyal servant wrongly accused. He'll make Kyle look weak for arresting him, and he'll use every moment to sow doubt and chaos. Then we don't let him control the narrative. Easier said than done. The man's been manipulating courts for decades. Maven's expression was serious. You need to be ready for him to attack you directly, question your motives, make you look like the outsider who destroyed a loyal general. I am an outsider. But you're also the person who saved this kingdom from his war. Don't forget that. And don't let him make you forget it either. As a commotion near the main gate drew their attention, shouts, the sound of horses, guards mobilizing. They ran toward the noise. The courtyard was chaos. A rider had just arrived, one of Hrothgar's scouts, his horse foam-flecked and exhausted. Kael was already there. Report. Western garrison, the scout gasped. Under attack. Captain Vorden sealed the gates and declared independence from the crown. He's claiming you've lost your mind, that arresting General Malcor proves you're unfit to rule. The courtyard went dead silent. Kyle's face could have been carved from ice. How many men does Vorden command? 300, plus whatever local militia he can recruit. And the garrison's position? Controls the main western pass. If he holds it, we can't deliver supplies to the western clans, can't move troops west, can't access half our territory. Seraphina felt sick. This was it. This was Malcor's dead man's switch. If they couldn't deliver the promised supplies, the western clans would assume betrayal. They'd attack. And with Vorden holding the pass, Kael couldn't fight on two fronts. Malcor had just checkmated them from a prison cell. We need to retake that garrison, Hrothgar said. Fast, before Vorden fortifies his position. With what forces? Theron asked. Most of our western troops are loyal to Vorden. If we attack with eastern forces, we're looking at a civil war. So what do we do? Let him hold our territory hostage? Kael's hands clenched. We negotiate. You can't negotiate with this, Hrothgar said. Vorden's making a play for power. Talking to him just legitimizes his rebellion. Then what's your suggestion? Storm a fortified garrison with troops who might switch sides mid-battle? They were arguing now, voices rising, stress fracturing the fragile unity. Seraphina stepped forward. There's another option. Everyone turned to look at her. We don't attack the garrison. We bypass it. Bypass it how? Kael asked. Vorden controls the only pass. The only easy pass. But there are mountain routes, harder, more dangerous, but passable if you're willing to risk it. She moved to the map table, tracing her finger along the mountain range. Here. The northern route. It's steep, exposed, takes twice as long. But it comes out here, behind Vorden's position. We deliver the supplies through the mountains and prove we kept our word. That route's a death trap in good weather, Theron said. Right now, with snow and ice, you're talking about losing half your convoy before you reach the other side. Maybe. But if we succeed, we deliver the supplies, maintain our treaty, and make Vorden's rebellion irrelevant. And if we fail, then we've lost the supplies, broken our promise, and started a war. She looked at Kael. But we're starting that war anyway if we don't try. Kael studied the map. How many wagons can that route handle? Not wagons. Pack animals. Mules, horses, people carrying supplies on their backs. Seraphina was working it out as she spoke. We send a small mobile force, maybe 50 people total. They move fast, travel light, avoid Vorden completely. 50 people against mountain passes that kill experienced climbers. Hrothgar shook his head. Who leads this suicide mission? I do, Seraphina said. The room erupted. Absolutely not, Kael said immediately. You can't be serious, Maven added. I'm completely serious. Seraphina's voice cut through the noise. The Western clans need to see we're keeping our word. If the king's own queen leads the convoy, it proves we're committed. It proves this isn't politics. It's genuine. It also gets you killed if the route's as dangerous as everyone says, Kael said. Then send experienced climbers with me. Mountain guides. People who know the terrain. And if Vorden finds out what you're doing, sends forces to intercept you? He won't, because you're going to keep him distracted. She looked at Kael directly. You make a show of preparing to retake the garrison, mass troops near the pass, make it look like you're about to attack. Vorden focuses all his attention on defending his position while we slip past through the mountains. Kael was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Theron. Can it work? Tactically, maybe. It's risky, but the logic's sound. Theron looked at Seraphina. But she's right about one thing. If the queen leads this convoy and succeeds, it sends a powerful message. About commitment, about integrity. And if she dies, then we've lost more than a queen. We've lost the person who's held this kingdom together for the past 3 weeks. Kyle looked at Seraphina, really looked at her. You understand what you're proposing. That route has killed people, strong people, experienced people. I understand. And you still want to do this? I don't want to, but I can't see another option that works. She moved closer to him, lowering her voice. Malcor's winning, Kyle. Right now, from that cell, he's beating us. We need to do something unexpected, something he couldn't plan for. This is it. He was quiet. Then he turned to the assembled commanders. We have 3 days before the trial. Can we organize a mountain convoy in that time? Barely, Hrothgar said. We'd need to pull in mountain guides, gather cold weather gear, select the best pack animals. It's going to be tight. Then make it happen. Cale's voice was final. Hrothgar, you're going with her. Take 20 of your best climbers. Theron, find me another 30 volunteers who can handle altitude and cold. Maven, supplies, food, medicine, cold weather gear, everything they'll need. What about the trial? Maven asked. We hold it as scheduled. If Seraphina's not back by then, we proceed without her. Cale looked around the room. And if anyone asks where the queen is, we say she's preparing evidence, which is technically true. He turned back to Seraphina. This is insane. I know. You could die. I know that too. Then why? Because someone has to, and I'm the only one whose death might actually mean something to the Western clans. She managed a smile. Besides, I'm tired of sitting in castles while other people fight. Time to prove I belong here. Cale looked at her for a long moment. Then, in front of everyone, he pulled her into an embrace. Come back, he said quietly. That's an order. Yes, Your Majesty. Well, they left before dawn the next morning. 52 people total. 23 experienced mountain guides and climbers. 20 soldiers who'd volunteered knowing full well this might be suicide. 5 handlers for the pack animals. And Seraphina, wearing layers of fur and wool that made her look twice her size. Hrothgar rode beside her as they left through a side gate, avoiding the main courtyard where people might see and ask questions. You know what you're doing is crazy, right? He said. Everyone keeps telling me that. Because it's true. This route doesn't forgive mistakes. One wrong step, one patch of bad ice, one avalanche. I get it, Hrothgar. It's dangerous. I was there when we planned this. He was quiet for a moment. You've changed since you arrived. Is that good or bad? Haven't decided yet. But the girl who walked into that throne room 3 weeks ago, she wouldn't have suggested this. She'd have found a safer option. There is no safer option. Not anymore. They rode through the pre-dawn darkness, following paths that grew progressively rougher. By the time the sun rose, they'd left the main roads behind entirely. The mountain route started innocuously enough, a wide trail through pine forest. But within 2 hours, the trail narrowed, steepened. The trees thinned and disappeared, leaving only rock and ice. One of the guides, a weathered woman named Kira, who looked like she'd been carved from the mountains themselves, called a halt. Everyone off horses. From here we walk, and you follow exactly where I step. Exactly. The ice here is unstable. One wrong placement, and you go down. They dismounted. The pack animals were redistributed, the supplies carefully balanced. Then they began to climb. Seraphina had thought she understood cold, but this was different. This was cold that bit through every layer, found every gap in her clothing, turned her fingers numb despite the gloves. And they'd barely started. The first day was brutal. They climbed for 8 hours, stopping only for brief rests. Several people slipped on the ice. One of the pack mules lost its footing and tumbled down a slope, taking half its load with it. They made camp that night on a narrow ledge, barely wide enough for all of them. No fires. The wind was too strong and the risk of avalanche too high. They huddled together for warmth and ate cold rations. Hrothgar sat beside Seraphina, both of them pressed against the rock face. Still think this was a good idea? He asked. Ask me when we're down the other side. If we make it down the other side. Optimistic as always. He laughed, short and tired. You know what's funny? 3 weeks ago I thought you were just another southern lady who'd cry about the cold and go home within a month. Now you're leading a convoy through a mountain pass that scares people who were born here. People change. Not usually this fast, and not usually this completely. He looked at her. What happened to you? What made you decide to become this? Seraphina thought about that first feast. About Malcor's dismissive smile. About every moment since when she'd been underestimated, dismissed, treated like she didn't matter. I got tired of being invisible, she said finally. And I realized that in the North, you either fight for your place or you disappear. I chose to fight. Most people who choose to fight end up dead. Then I'll die fighting. Better than dying quietly. Hrothgar was silent for a moment. Then he clapped her shoulder. You'll do, Virel. You'll do. The second day was worse. They hit a section where the trail had partially collapsed. The guide spent 3 hours finding an alternate route that required them to climb up a near vertical rock face using ropes and sheer determination. 2 people fell. One caught himself on a rope and lived. The other wasn't so lucky. They buried him in a shallow grave carved from snow and kept moving. By the third day, everyone was exhausted. The altitude made every breath a struggle. The cold had caused frostbite in several climbers, and they still had the highest pass to cross. Kira called another halt at the base of the final climb. This is the worst part, she said, addressing the group. The pass itself. It's narrow, exposed, and the wind up there can knock you off your feet. We go single file. We rope together. And if someone falls, you hold that rope like your life depends on it, because it does. They roped up in groups of 5. Seraphina was in the middle of her group, between Hrothgar and one of the younger soldiers who looked terrified. Stay close, Hrothgar told him. Watch where the person in front of you steps. Don't look down. They began the final climb. The wind hit them like a physical force. Seraphina had to lean into it just to stay upright. The path was maybe 2 feet wide, carved into the side of the mountain with nothing but empty air on one side. One step, then another. Don't think about the drop. Don't think about falling. Just keep moving. The young soldier behind her slipped. She felt the rope jerk tight, heard his scream. She braced herself, digging her feet into the ice, holding on while Hrothgar did the same ahead of her. The soldier was dangling over the edge, one hand clutching the rope, the other scrabbling for purchase on the ice. Pull! Hrothgar shouted. They pulled. Inch by inch, fighting the wind and the angle and the weight, they dragged him back onto the path. He lay there, gasping, shaking with terror and relief. We keep moving, Kira called from ahead. We can't stop here. They moved, step by agonizing step, fighting the mountain for every foot of progress. And then, finally, they reached the top. The other side was gentler, a long downward slope instead of the brutal climb they'd just endured. They could see the western valleys below, and beyond them, the cluster of villages where the western clans lived. We made it, someone said, voice full of disbelief. We made it, Seraphina echoed. Hrothgar looked at her, grinning despite his exhaustion. You actually did it. You crazy, stubborn, southern, you actually did it. The descent took another 2 days, but it was easier, warmer, less terrifying. When they finally reached the first western village, word had already spread. The Northern Queen had crossed the Death Pass. She'd brought supplies, kept the promise. The Western clan leaders were waiting. They were the same warriors who'd met them at the neutral ground, the same scarred leader, the same suspicion. But this time, he looked at Seraphina differently. You crossed the Northern Pass, he said. It wasn't a question. We did. People die on that route. Strong people. We lost one. He was a good man. He died getting your people food. The Western leader studied her for a long moment. Then he gestured to his warriors. Unload the supplies. Distribute them to the villages. They worked quickly, efficiently. Within an hour, the pack animals were empty and food was being distributed. The leader approached Seraphina again. Your king promised justice. Has he delivered? He's holding a public trial in 2 days. You and your leadership are invited to witness it. See the evidence. Judge for yourselves. And if we don't believe it, then you make your own decision, but we've kept our word about everything else. The supplies, the investigation, the transparency. Give us the chance to prove the rest. He was quiet. Then he nodded. We'll come. We'll see your justice. And then we'll decide if your word means anything. That's all I'm asking. They made it back to Frostholm the night before the trial. Seraphina was exhausted, frostbitten, and had lost 10 pounds from 5 days of brutal climbing and minimal food. But she was alive, and they'd succeeded. Kyle met them at the gate personally. When he saw her, something in his expression cracked. He pulled her off her horse and into an embrace that lifted her off her feet. "You're insane," he said into her hair. "Completely insane." "I kept my word." "I know. I heard. The entire kingdom's heard." He set her down, looking at her properly. "You crossed the death pass. Delivered the supplies. Convinced the Western clans to give us a chance. Do you have any idea what you've done? Proved I'm not just decorative?" He laughed, the sound startled out of him. "You've become a legend. In 3 weeks, you went from Southern Bride to the Queen who crossed the death pass. People are going to tell stories about this. Let them talk after the trial." "Did Vorden surrender?" "No, but he's isolated now. With the supplies delivered, he has no leverage. His rebellion is just a tantrum." Kale's expression hardened. "Tomorrow we deal with Malcor. End this once and for all." "Is he ready?" "He's been ready. Apparently he's been planning his defense since the moment they arrested him." Kale looked worried. "Maven was right. He's going to turn this trial into theater, try to undermine everything we've built." "Then we don't let him." Seraphina was exhausted, but her mind was clear. "We present the evidence. We let the Western clans see it. And we show everyone that truth matters more than politics. You make it sound simple. It is simple. It's just not easy." He studied her face. "You've changed. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. The woman I married 3 weeks ago, she wouldn't have done any of this. Maybe she would have. Maybe she just needed a reason." Seraphina looked toward the castle. "Is Maven inside?" "Preparing your testimony for tomorrow. She wants to go over it with you before you sleep." "Then I'd better not keep her waiting." But as she started toward the gate, Kael caught her hand. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for fighting, for surviving, for refusing to break when everyone expected you to. Thank you for letting me try." She went inside, where Maven was indeed waiting with documents and questions and 1,000 details about tomorrow's trial. But as they worked through the night, Seraphina felt something settle in her chest, something solid and unshakable. She'd crossed the death pass. She'd kept her word. She'd earned her place. Tomorrow they'd finish what she'd started. Tomorrow, they'd show Malcor that his smile meant nothing. Tomorrow, truth would win. She just had to survive one more day. The trial began at noon. The Great Hall had been transformed into a courtroom, benches for witnesses, a raised platform for Kyle, and in the center, a cage where Malcor stood, chains on his wrists but his expression calm. The hall was packed. Every noble, every commander, every person who could claim a reason to be there had crowded in. And along the walls, Western clan leaders watched with hard eyes. Kyle stood. "We are here to determine the truth, to judge the evidence, to deliver justice for crimes committed against our kingdom and against the Western clans." He gestured to a table where Malcor's journal sat alongside other evidence, requisition forms, payment records, testimony from arrested conspirators. General Malcor Vesh stands accused of conspiracy, murder, treason, and crimes against the peace. How do you answer these charges? Malcor smiled that pleasant, poisonous smile. "Not guilty, Your Majesty. Not guilty to all charges." "Then let's examine the evidence." For 3 hours, they presented everything: the journal, the poison purchases, the arrow commissions, testimony from Edris about the records, testimony from guards about Malcor's meetings with known conspirators. The evidence was damning, overwhelming, undeniable. And through all of it, Malcor stood calm and quiet, letting them build their case. Finally, Kyle turned to him. "You've heard the evidence. Do you wish to speak in your defense?" "I do, Your Majesty." Malcor stepped forward as far as his chains allowed. He looked at the assembled court, at the Western leaders, at Seraphina. "Everything they've presented is accurate," he said calmly. The hall erupted in shocked whispers. "I did purchase poison. I did commission arrows. I did plan the Western conflict." His voice carried clearly. "But I did it to save this kingdom." Kale's expression was stone. "Explain." "The Western clans have been a threat for decades, raiding, stealing, killing our people. We've tried negotiation, tried peace. It never lasts. Malkor looked at the Western leaders. You know it's true. Your people and ours have been fighting since before either of us were born. The Western leaders stood. We fought because you pushed into our territories, took our lands, and we took those lands because they were better than the frozen wastes you claimed, because resources are scarce and strength determines who survives. Malkor's voice was reasonable, almost gentle. I didn't create the conflict between our peoples. I just recognized it was inevitable. So I chose to resolve it on our terms from a position of strength. By murdering envoys, Seraphina said, by poisoning innocents, by making hard choices that no one else had the courage to make. He looked at her directly. You're young, idealistic. You think truth and justice solve everything, but they don't. Sometimes the moral choice leads to more death than the ruthless one. That's not for you to decide alone, Kael said. Then who should decide? You? Malkor's voice had an edge now. You, who can't make a decision without consulting advisors, weighing options, seeking consensus? This kingdom doesn't need a philosopher. It needs a leader willing to act. What it needs is someone who doesn't engineer wars to prove their own importance, Seraphina said. Malkor smiled at her. And yet here you are, the foreign queen who's been here less than a month, passing judgment on those who've bled for this kingdom for decades. Tell me, Your Majesty, what gives you the right? The same thing that gives you the right to call yourself loyal while planning your king's assassination. She pulled out a specific page from his journal. This is your handwriting, your plan. Remove final obstacles to full control. King Kael, Queen Seraphina, Commander Hrothgar. Priority targets. She held it up for the court to see. You weren't saving the kingdom. You were trying to own it. Malkor's pleasant expression finally cracked. I was trying to make it strong, to give it the leadership it deserves. By killing the king, if necessary. The hall went silent. Kael stood slowly. You just confessed to planning my assassination. I confessed to planning what was necessary. There's a difference. No, Kael said quietly. There really isn't. He looked at the Western leaders. You've seen the evidence, heard his confession. Do you believe we've delivered justice? The scarred leader stood. He looked at Malkor for a long moment, then at Kael, then at Seraphina. The Northern Queen crossed the death pass to keep her word, risked her life to deliver supplies, and now she stands here presenting evidence that destroys the man who wronged my people. He nodded slowly. Yes, we believe you've delivered justice. Kael turned back to Malkor. General Malkor Vesh, you are found guilty of all charges. The sentence is death, to be carried out at dawn. Malkor looked at him, really looked at him, and for just a moment, something like regret flickered across his face. You could have been great, he said quietly. I'd rather be decent, Kael replied. Guards moved forward to take Malkor away. As they led him out, he looked back at Seraphina one last time. No smile now, just assessment, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Then he was gone. The hall erupted in noise, relief, celebration, argument. The Western leaders approached Kael, and suddenly everyone was talking about peace treaties, trade agreements, the future. Seraphina slipped away quietly, needing air, needing space to process what had just happened. She found herself on the same balcony where Kael had warned her about Malkor that first week. It felt like a lifetime ago. Footsteps behind her. She turned to find Kael approaching. They're calling you the Iron Queen, he said. That's dramatic. It's accurate. You crossed the death pass, exposed a conspiracy, and helped deliver justice. He stood beside her, looking out at the mountains. 3 weeks ago, you were a political arrangement. Now you're the person holding this kingdom together. We're holding it together. Are we? He turned to face her. Because from where I'm standing, you've done most of the heavy lifting. You arrested your oldest friend. That wasn't easy. No, but it was necessary. You showed me that. He was quiet for a moment. I owe you an apology. For what? For underestimating you, for assuming you were just a treaty in a dress, for not seeing who you actually were until you forced me to pay attention. Seraphina smiled. You're forgiven, on one condition. What's that? Never underestimate me again. He laughed. Then before she could react, he kissed her. Not a political kiss, Not a formal gesture. A real kiss, full of relief and respect, and something that might have been the beginning of actual affection. When he pulled back, he looked almost surprised by himself. "Sorry, that was about time," she finished. He smiled, really smiled. The first genuine expression of happiness she'd seen from him. The Western leaders want to celebrate. Something about a feast to honor the peace. Another feast? This one should be less hostile than the first. That's a low bar. Come anyway, you've earned it. They walked back inside together, side by side, equal partners in a kingdom that had almost destroyed itself. Malcor would die at dawn. His conspiracy was broken. The Western clans were satisfied. But as Seraphina entered that feast hall to applause and celebration, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't finished yet. Malcor had been too calm, too accepting, like he knew something they didn't, like this was all part of a larger plan. She pushed the thought away and forced herself to smile. Tonight was for celebrating, for showing the court and the kingdom that truth had won. Tomorrow, she'd worry about what came next. Tonight, she'd earned the right to breathe. Tomorrow came with alarm bells. Seraphina jerked awake to the sound of steel clashing and men shouting. Dawn was barely breaking, the sky that strange gray color that came right before sunrise. She threw on clothes and grabbed the knife Maven had given her, her mind racing. What now? What had gone wrong? The corridor outside her room was chaos, guards running, servants screaming, the smell of smoke drifting up from below. Hrothgar appeared, sword drawn and bleeding from a cut on his arm. They broke him out. What? Malcor. His people staged a rescue, killed 6 guards, set fire to the East Barracks as a distraction, and got him out of the cells. Seraphina's stomach dropped. Where's Kael? Armory, mobilizing the guard. He wants you in the safe room. Not happening. She pushed past him. If Malcor's loose, he's going to try to finish this. Where would he go? Hrothgar grabbed her arm. Seraphina, this isn't... The explosion cut him off. The entire castle shook. Stone dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere below, people were screaming. That came from the Great Hall, Hrothgar said, where the Western leaders are sleeping. Understanding hit her like a physical blow. He's going to kill them, frame Kael for it, restart the war. You don't know that. Yes, I do. It's what I'd do if I were him. She was already running. One explosion, all the Western leaders dead, and suddenly we're the treacherous Northerners who lured them here to murder them. Everything we've built collapses. She ran through corridors filling with smoke, Hrothgar cursing behind her as he followed. Guards were everywhere, trying to organize, trying to respond to too many crises at once. They reached the Great Hall to find the doors blown inward, smoke pouring out. Inside was carnage. Part of the ceiling had collapsed. Bodies lay scattered, some moving, some not. And in the center of the destruction, Malcor stood with a dozen armed men, all of them surrounding the Western clan leaders who'd been trapped by falling debris. The scarred Western leader was bleeding from a head wound but still on his feet, his people forming a defensive circle around him. Malcor saw Seraphina and smiled. That smile, the one that had haunted her. The queen herself. How convenient. He raised his voice. Everyone stay very still. Any movement and my men start killing hostages. This is insane, Malcor, Seraphina said. You can't what? Win. I already have. He gestured at the destruction. The Western leaders are about to die in a tragic attack. My loyal followers will testify that King Kael ordered it, that he never intended to honor the peace. And when the Western clans retaliate, I'll be the one who leads the defense. The hero who saves the kingdom from the chaos the king created. No one will believe that. Everyone will believe it, because you'll be dead too. The treacherous southern queen who manipulated the weak king into betraying his own people. His smile widened. It's actually quite elegant. Both problems solved at once. Hrothgar stepped forward, sword raised. You'll have to go through me first. Gladly. Malcor's men moved forward, but before they could attack, a new voice rang out. Stand down, all of you. Kael strode into the hall, flanked by 30 armed guards. His sword was drawn and his expression was murder. It's over, Malcor. Over? I have hostages. I have loyal men. I have nothing. Kael's voice was ice. Your rebellion at the Western garrison collapsed an hour ago. Captain Vorden surrendered when he realized no reinforcements were coming. Your remaining supporters in the castle have been arrested, and the men standing behind you, they're surrounded. Malcor looked around. More guards were filing into the hall, weapons drawn, blocking every exit. You're alone, Kael said. Let the hostages go and surrender. It's the only option you have left. For the first time, Malcor's pleasant expression cracked completely. Rage twisted his features. The only option? You think you can dictate terms to me? I think you've lost. Accept it. I've given 15 years to this kingdom. 15 years of service, of sacrifice, of making the hard choices you were too weak to make. Malcor's voice was rising now. And this is how you repay me? By arresting me, humiliating me, condemning me. You tried to start a war. You murdered innocents. You planned my assassination. Kael's voice was steady. You did this to yourself. I did this for you, for the kingdom, for yourself, Seraphina interrupted. You did it for power, for control. Don't pretend this was noble. Malcor turned his full attention to her. You. This is all because of you. If you just stayed quiet, played your role, everything would have worked. If I'd stayed quiet, you'd have killed thousands of people and seized the throne. So no, I'm not sorry I didn't play my role. You ruined everything. Good. He moved fast, faster than she expected. His sword was in his hand and cutting toward her in one smooth motion. But Hrothgar was faster. He intercepted the strike, blade meeting blade with a sound like thunder. Malcor's men surged forward, and suddenly the hall erupted into battle. Seraphina ducked behind an overturned table, watching as Kael's guards clashed with the rebels. The Western clan leaders were fighting too, having grabbed weapons from fallen guards. This was chaos. Complete, violent chaos. She needed to end it, needed to stop this before more people died. Her eyes landed on Malcor's sword, currently locked with Hrothgar's blade, and she saw her opening. She grabbed a fallen guard's dagger and ran, not toward Malcor, toward the Western leader. Cut through the debris, she shouted at him. Get your people out, now! What about just go? He understood, started hacking at the fallen timbers trapping his warriors. Malcor noticed, disengaged from Hrothgar and turned toward the escaping hostages. No, he charged, and Seraphina stepped into his path. She wasn't a fighter, had barely held a sword before coming to the north, but she'd watched Kael train, had studied how he moved, how he anticipated attacks. She used every bit of that knowledge now. Malcor's strike came high. She ducked under it, feeling the blade pass inches from her head, came up inside his guard and drove the dagger toward his chest. He blocked it, barely. His expression showed genuine surprise. You've learned, he said. I've survived. There's a difference. They fought. Brief, brutal exchanges where she was clearly outmatched but refused to back down. She couldn't beat him, but she could keep him busy long enough for the Western leaders to escape. Timber cracked. The clan warriors broke through their prison and scattered. Malcor realized what she'd done, and his expression turned murderous. You cost me everything. You cost yourself everything. He drove her back, strike after punishing strike. Her arms were shaking from blocking. Her defense was crumbling. Then Kael was there. His sword intercepted Malcor's in a clash that sent sparks flying. You want to fight? Fight me! Malcor smiled, finally, a genuine smile. With pleasure. They fought like men who'd trained together for years and knew every move the other would make. Perfectly matched, brutally efficient. But Kael had something Malcor didn't. He had something worth fighting for beyond power. He drove Malcor back step by step, each strike forcing the general to give ground. Around them, the battle was ending, rebels surrendering as they realized they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Finally, Kael's blade found its mark. Not a killing blow, a disarming one. Malcor's sword went flying, clattering across the stone floor. The general stood there, bleeding from a dozen small cuts, surrounded by armed guards with nowhere left to run. Yield, Kael said. Malcor looked at him, at Seraphina, at the ruins of his plan. No. He lunged for a fallen sword, and Hrothgar's blade took him through the chest. Malcor stopped, looked down at the steel protruding from his body. then up at Hrothgar with something like surprise. You, he coughed, blood on his lips. You were supposed to be mine, my protege. I was loyal to the kingdom, Hrothgar said quietly. Not to you. Malcor collapsed. The hall went silent. Kael stood over the body, breathing hard, his expression complicated. Get the healers, he ordered. Anyone wounded gets treatment. I don't care which side they were on. Guards moved to obey. Seraphina approached slowly. Kael looked at her, and something in his face cracked. Are you hurt? No, you? I'll live. He looked at Malcor's body. He was like a father to me. Or I thought he was. I'm sorry. Don't be. You were right about him from the start. I just couldn't see it. He turned away from the body. Is everyone out? The Western leaders? They're safe. Hrothgar's people are checking them now. As if summoned, the scarred Western leader approached. He was bleeding, bruised, but alive. Your man just saved my life, he said, gesturing to Hrothgar, and your queen kept the traitor busy long enough for us to escape. She has a habit of doing the impossible, Kael said. The Western leader looked at Seraphina directly. When we first met, I thought you were weak, soft, a political pawn with no real power. He shook his head slowly. I was wrong. You crossed the death pass, exposed a conspiracy, and just now you fought a trained killer to protect people who came here as enemies. You're not enemies anymore, Seraphina said. No, we're not. He held out his hand, the traditional warrior's gesture of respect. Your word is good, Queen Seraphina, and that means something to my people. She took his hand, gripping firm. Then let's build something better than war. Let's build peace that actually lasts. Agreed. The aftermath took weeks to sort through. Malcor's remaining supporters were arrested and tried. Most accepted reduced sentences in exchange for testimony. A few chose exile rather than imprisonment. Captain Vorden was executed for his rebellion. The Western garrison was placed under new command, young officers without ties to the old conspiracy. The peace treaty with the Western clans was formalized in a ceremony attended by both kingdoms. Trade routes opened. Border disputes were resolved through negotiation rather than violence. And Seraphina found herself at the center of all of it. She sat in on treaty negotiations, advised on supply distribution, worked with Maven to reorganize the castle staff and remove anyone whose loyalty was questionable. The court that had dismissed her a month ago now listened when she spoke, not because she was the king's wife, because she'd earned their respect through blood and determination. One morning, Maven found her in the library, surrounded by maps and correspondence. You're working too hard, the older woman said. There's too much to do. There's always too much to do. That's not an excuse to work yourself to death. Maven sat down across from her. You've changed this kingdom in a month. You're allowed to rest. Have I changed it, or just survived it? Both. Maven smiled. You know what people are calling you now? The Iron Queen, I've heard. Not just that, the Bridge Queen. Because you built a bridge between North and South, between us and the Western clans, between the old ways and something better. Maven's expression was fond. That Southern girl who walked into the throne room terrified? She's gone. You became someone new. I'm still terrified most of the time. That's what makes you smart. Fear keeps you careful. But you don't let it stop you. Maven stood. The king's looking for you, by the way. Something about the winter feast. But Seraphina found Kael in the courtyard, overseeing preparations for the celebration. Winter had fully arrived, snow covering everything, the air sharp and clean. He saw her and smiled, that genuine smile that still surprised her when it appeared. Maven said you needed me? I wanted to ask you something. He gestured for her to walk with him, away from the workers. The winter feast is in 3 days. Tradition says the king and queen open the celebration together. I know. I've been reading about northern customs. Of course you have. He was quiet for a moment. This will be different from that first feast. No hostility, no tests, just celebration. Sounds nice. It will be. But I wanted to ask... He stopped walking, turning to face her. When we married, it was political, an arrangement. You didn't choose me and I didn't choose you. We were told this was necessary, and we accepted it. I remember. But that's not what we are anymore, is it? Seraphina looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd trusted her when she was still proving herself, who'd arrested his oldest friend because she showed him the truth, who'd fought beside her and protected her and slowly become someone she actually cared about. No, she said, it's not. Then I want to ask you something, not as a king making a political decision, just as me. He took her hand. Stay, not because a treaty says you have to, not because it's expected, but because you want to. Because this, us, is real. Kael, I know it's complicated. I know we still have things to figure out. But somewhere between that first feast and now, I stopped seeing you as an obligation and started seeing you as a partner, as someone I trust completely, as someone I... He paused, searching for words. Someone I don't want to lose. Seraphina felt something warm settle in her chest. I crossed a mountain pass that kills experienced climbers. I fought a conspiracy that nearly destroyed this kingdom. I faced down warlords and exposed traitors. She squeezed his hand. You think I'd survive all that just to leave now? Is that a yes? That's a yes. He kissed her. Not the first kiss. That had been relief and surprise. This was something deeper, a promise, a choice. When they broke apart, he was grinning. You know you're going to have to learn to like the whiskey eventually. Never. That stuff's terrible. It grows on you. Like frostbite? He laughed and pulled her close, and for the first time since arriving in this frozen kingdom, Seraphina felt warm. The winter feast was everything the first feast hadn't been. The hall was decorated with evergreen boughs and candles. Music played, northern songs that Seraphina was slowly learning. Food filled the tables in abundance, much of it from the improved trade with the western clans. And people were genuinely happy. Seraphina wore a dress that Maven had helped her choose, northern style, but fitted to her frame, deep blue wool with silver thread that caught the candlelight. She'd braided her hair in the northern fashion and wore the simple silver crown that marked her as queen. She looked like she belonged, because she did. Kael stood beside her as they entered the hall together. The entire court rose, applause filling the space. Hrothgar was there, his arm healed, raising a cup in salute. Theron sat with his naval commanders, looking more relaxed than Seraphina had ever seen him. Maven stood near the kitchens, watching everything with the careful attention of someone making sure nothing went wrong. And along one wall, the Western clan leaders sat as honored guests. The scarred leader caught her eye and nodded once, respect between equals. Kael raised his hand for silence. Winter comes hard to the north, he said, but we survive it, together, through loyalty, through strength, through trust in each other. He looked at Seraphina. A month ago, a stranger walked into this hall. Someone who didn't know our ways, didn't know our people, didn't know if she'd survive a week in the cold. The hall was silent, listening. She not only survived, she changed us. She showed us that strength isn't just about swords and wars. It's about keeping your word when it costs you everything. It's about fighting for truth, even when it's dangerous. It's about crossing impossible mountains because you promised you would. He took her hand. My queen, my partner. The person who saved this kingdom when I couldn't see the danger right in front of me. He raised his cup. To Seraphina, the Iron Queen, the Bridge Queen, the woman who refused to break. To the Queen! The hall roared. Seraphina felt her eyes burning. She'd fought so hard to get here, to earn this, to prove she was more than a political arrangement. And now, standing in a hall full of people who respected her, holding the hand of a man who'd become more than a duty, she understood something fundamental. She hadn't changed the North had changed her, turned her from someone afraid of being invisible into someone who demanded to be seen, from someone who accepted her place into someone who carved out her own, from a pawn into a queen who actually ruled. The feast continued late into the night. Stories were told, increasingly exaggerated versions of the conspiracy, the death pass, the final battle. Seraphina heard herself described as everything from a warrior goddess to a cunning spy. She just smiled and let them talk. As the celebration wound down, she found herself back on the balcony where this had all started, where Kael had warned her about Malkor that first week. Hrothgar joined her, carrying 2 cups of that terrible whiskey. Thought you might need this. I really don't. Drink it anyway. It's tradition. She took the cup and sipped. It was still terrible, but maybe slightly less terrible than before. You did good work, Hrothgar said. Really good. The kingdom's more stable now than it's been in years. We did good work. All of us. Fair. He looked out at the mountains. You planning to stay? Actually stay? Not just politically, but really? Why does everyone keep asking me that? Because you have options now. You're not trapped here. You could negotiate an exit, go home with honor, live somewhere warmer. Seraphina thought about her father's court, the warm weather, the familiar faces, the life she'd left behind. And she thought about this frozen kingdom, the people who'd become allies, the challenges that remained, the man inside who'd become more than an obligation. I'm staying, she said. This is home now. Even with the terrible weather and the worse whiskey, especially because of those things, they keep me sharp. Hrothgar laughed. You'll do, Virel. You'll do just fine. He left her there with her cup and her thoughts. The stars were bright above the mountains, cold wind cut through even her warmest cloak, and somewhere in the distance, wolves howled. This kingdom was harsh and unforgiving. It demanded everything from the people who lived here. It broke the weak and challenged the strong. But it was hers now. Not because she'd married into it, because she'd fought for it, bled for it, proven she belonged here through determination and courage and sheer stubborn refusal to be dismissed. Kael found her there eventually. He wrapped an additional fur around her shoulders and stood beside her in comfortable silence. What are you thinking about? He asked finally. That I was terrified walking into your court that first day. You hit it well. Not really. I just didn't let it stop me. She looked at him. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. For listening when I challenged you. For trusting me even when it meant doubting people you'd known for years. You made it impossible not to trust you. He pulled her closer. Besides, you saved my life, my kingdom, everything that matters. I'm the one who should be thanking you. Then we're even. They stood there watching the stars, 2 people who'd started as strangers and become something more through fire and blood and shared purpose. The north stretched out before them, vast, dangerous, beautiful, full of challenges still to face, problems still to solve, enemies still to defeat. But they'd face them together, king and queen, partners, equals. The woman who'd walked into that throne room a month ago had been afraid of being invisible, of disappearing into a role she hadn't chosen. That woman was gone. In her place stood Queen Seraphina Virel of the North, the woman who crossed the death pass, who exposed conspiracy, who refused to bow to anyone who underestimated her, the woman who'd earned her crown not through marriage, but through merit. And she was just getting started. Winter was long in the north, but spring always came eventually. And when it did, there would be new trade routes to establish, new alliances to build, new challenges to face. She was ready for all of it. The girl who'd arrived here had been a pawn, but the woman standing on this balcony, wrapped in furs and crowned in silver, was a queen, and she'd never bow to anyone again. Below in the feast hall, laughter and music continued, the celebration of survival, of triumph, of a kingdom that had almost destroyed itself but had been saved by truth and courage. Seraphina smiled. She'd come to the north expecting to endure, to survive, to make the best of an arrangement she hadn't chosen. Instead, she'd found something she never expected. She'd found herself. And that was worth more than any crown. Kael squeezed her hand gently. Ready to go back inside? In a minute. I want to remember this. Remember what? Everything. How it felt to be afraid, how it felt to fight anyway, how it felt to win. She looked at the mountains one more time. So I never forget what it took to get here. You won't forget, that's not who you are. No, she agreed. It's not. They went back inside together, leaving the cold and darkness behind for warmth and light and a future they'd build together. The story would be told for generations. The southern queen who came to the frozen north and refused to break, who crossed impossible mountains and exposed deadly conspiracies, who stood alone against power and won through truth and courage. But the story wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who refused to accept injustice, who fought for truth even when it cost them everything, who looked at impossible odds and decided to try anyway. It was about choosing to matter, to be seen, to leave the world different than you found it. And in the end, that was the only story worth telling. The feast continued, the North endured, and Queen Seraphina, once dismissed as decorative and disposable, ruled beside her king with wisdom earned through fire. She'd arrived as a pawn, she'd become a queen, and she'd never be invisible again. The end. But really, it was just the beginning.